Rowan had come back to life. At 27, he was once again a young man, with a wife, 2 kids, and a second chance. His wife, Vivian, wasn't just any woman. She was a towering figure in the business world, a Forbes regular, and once named one of Time magazine's most influential women alive. Her name flashed across news tickers and glossy magazine covers. In the world of the rich and powerful, Vivian was not just respected, she was revered. Everyone said Rowan had hit the jackpot. So the first thing he did with this second chance? He walked into a sleek Manhattan bar, handed a divorce agreement across the table to her ex-boyfriend, and said flatly, "I want out. Vivian's yours. The kids, too." Lucian stared at him like he'd grown horns. For 6 years, Rowan had held the legal title of husband, and now he was offering to give it up without a fight. Rowan's voice didn't waver. "They all seem to prefer you anyway. So take them. All I ask is you get her to sign. Once the waiting period's over, I'll be gone. No more trying to be someone's shadow. No more playing the invisible husband of the unstoppable Vivian Everly. Not in this lifetime." Lucian's fingers idly traced the rim of his whiskey glass. His jaw tightened. "What kind of game is this, Rowan?" Rowan held his gaze. Calm. Certain. "No game. I'm just done. You have any idea how many men out there would kill to be in your shoes?" "I do," Rowan said. "That's why I'm giving them to you." For the first time, Lucian's confidence cracked. His expression shifted, something between confusion and calculation, as he stared down at the papers. And then, slowly, he reached for them. "Well. Since you're being so generous," Lucian murmured, "I won't say no. But remember this, once something's in my hands, I don't give it back." "You won't have to," Rowan said, smiling faintly. "I'll never want it back." Because in his last life, he'd already learned what it was like to die forgotten. He'd lived the ache of being invisible. This time, he'd leave on his own terms. Lucian stood, smooth as ever, and moved to another table near the window. With practiced elegance, he pulled out his phone, fingers tapping lightly across the screen. When the call connected, his voice transformed, soft, warm, and intimate. "Vivian, I'm at Pine and Bean Cafe. Could you swing by and pick me up?" From his seat across the room, Rowan watched, a faint, bitter smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. There was a time he used to call Vivian, too, only to be answered by her assistant 9 times out of 10. But now? Less than 20 minutes later, the woman who was always, in a meeting, walked through the cafe doors like she had nothing more important in the world. Through the glass, Rowan saw her long legs stride across the tile floor, her custom-tailored black suit dress accentuating every sharp, elegant line of her body. Their 6-year-old son, Aiden, and 4-year-old daughter, Maya, launched themselves at Lucian the moment they spotted him. Giggling, hugging, clinging. "Uncle Lucian." Maya squealed, her tiny face nuzzling into his chest like she belonged there. Vivian set a small cake box down on the table, her slender fingers nudging it toward him. "Chocolate. Your favorite. Told the chef to go easy on the sugar, just the way you like it." Lucian's eyes lit up. "You never forget." In the corner, Rowan's nails dug into his own palm. 6 years of marriage, and Vivian still didn't know what flavor he liked. He remembered lying in a hospital bed last time, asking for something sweet. She'd sent an assistant to grab whatever was closest. He'd unwrapped it to find mango, he was allergic. "What do you want for dinner?" Vivian asked, her voice low and unhurried. Lucian gave a tight-lipped smile and pulled a folded document from his leather briefcase. "Before that, there's something I'd like you to look over." He flipped to the signature page of the divorce agreement. "There's this villa I've had my eye on. But I'm a little short on liquid cash at the moment, would you mind?" Vivian took the pen, didn't even glance at the paperwork, and signed. "Between you and me, why draw lines? Uncle Lucian's getting a new house?" Aiden piped up, his round face tilted in awe. "Mom, can we get one nearby too? Maya and I want to move in with Uncle Lucian. We don't want to be stuck with Dad all the time." Vivian's brows twitched slightly. But then she caught their eager little faces and softened. "All right," she said. "We'll get one." Lucian raised both hands, chuckling. "That's not necessary. I'll save 3 rooms for Aiden, Maya, and you. Come and go as you please." The kids burst into cheers. Maya threw her arms around Lucian's neck and kissed his cheek. "Uncle Lucian, you're the best. Way better than Daddy, like, 1,000 times better." Rowan's chest tightened with a dull, relentless ache, as if some invisible fist had reached inside and clutched his heart, squeezing until he couldn't breathe. He saw it, that barely there curve at the corner of Vivian's lips. A softness she had never once shown him. That was his breaking point. Without another word, Rowan grabbed his bag, stood, and walked out. As the cafe doors swung shut behind him, the past came crashing down like a tidal wave. In his previous life, he had married Vivian through a business alliance. They'd had 2 children. He lived until 62, without ever once knowing what happiness felt like. Because Vivian's heart had never truly been his. It had always belonged to Lucian. After their youthful breakup, Lucian had left the country. Vivian spiraled for a few days, drinking herself into a haze, but proud as she was, she never once tried to win him back. Instead, she accepted her family's marriage arrangement without hesitation. To Rowan, she had been everything, his teenage fantasy, the cool and untouchable heiress every trust fund son in Kingsport had dreamed of marrying. When he heard their families were planning a merger, he had been elated. Giddy. He went into that marriage with his whole heart. And all he ever got in return was Vivian's silence, her distance, her cold civility. Until Lucian returned from overseas. She didn't ask for a divorce. But from that moment on, she never once looked away from Lucian. Worse still, their children grew to love Lucian, too. And slowly, they drifted from him. All of them. In the end, Rowan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Vivian, citing the need for peace and quiet, left him alone in their countryside estate. On his birthday, hands trembling, he dialed their numbers, his wife, his children. He learned they were in Hawaii, vacationing with Lucian. He tried to make himself a simple bowl of macaroni. But his mind failed him. He forgot to turn off the stove. The fire spread fast. Trapped, smoke rising, flames closing in, the last image that flashed before his eyes was Vivian's face. That exact moment she slid a wedding band onto his finger. The indifference in her gaze. The absence of love. He had shut his eyes in pain, with one final wish echoing in his chest. If there was a next life, he never wanted to lose himself for her again. Back in the present, Rowan stepped into the villa. The sky outside had already gone dark. But he didn't rest. He walked straight into the bedroom and began clearing things out. Vivian's designer dresses. The kids' toys. The framed family photos on the wall. One by one, he packed them into cardboard boxes. And made space. Not just in the room, but in his life. "What are you doing?" Vivian's voice cut through the silence like glass. Rowan turned. She stood in the doorway, hand in hand with the kids, brows drawn in a tight line. "Why is Daddy throwing our stuff away?" Maya bolted toward him, her eyes wide with alarm. She spotted her teddy bear shoved into a box, and her little face turned bright red with anger. Aiden marched forward too, glaring. "We were just playing with Uncle Lucian. Why are you so mad about that?" Vivian's gaze locked onto Rowan, cold and composed as ever. "They like being around Lucian. Is that really something to sulk about? I'm not angry, Rowan said quietly. Liar. Maya shrieked. You're jealous of Uncle Lucian. That's why you threw away Mr. Bear. You're a bad daddy. When I grow up, I'm moving in with Uncle Lucian, Aiden snapped, grabbing his sister's hand. We'll never come back to see you. Vivian didn't scold them. Didn't even flinch. She simply frowned ever so slightly and looked at Rowan as if he were some unhinged stranger causing a scene in someone else's home. That's enough, she said at last, her voice crisp and cultured, velvet over steel. She smoothed her dress with a flick of her manicured fingers, like this entire exchange was nothing more than a minor nuisance. I've got a board meeting in 5. Throw out whatever you want. Just keep it quiet. The door shut behind her with a soft but final click. Rowan stood there, alone, the echo of his children's accusations still ringing in the air. His eyes turned red, the sting sharp and silent. It felt like his heart had been torn apart, shredded into pieces so jagged that every breath tasted like blood. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Then looked at the mess. And laughed. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. He wouldn't bother her again. Not with noise. Not with emotion. Not for the rest of his life. Ever since the divorce papers had been signed, Rowan had stopped doing the chores. He no longer woke at 5 to prepare the kids' breakfast. No longer waited up late for Vivian to return from her business dinners, ready to tuck her into bed with warm tea and quiet comfort. All the responsibilities he once shouldered without complaint, the ones he used to consider simply part of being a husband and father, he handed over to the staff. At first, no one noticed the change. But then Aiden showed up late to school and got a warning from his teacher. Maya couldn't find her homework. Vivian's antique pocket watch stopped ticking. The housekeepers scrambled, but nothing seemed to meet the former master's standard. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Toys were scattered across the living room floor. Pressed dresses came out wrinkled at the seams. The home that used to run like a well-oiled machine was now slowly descending into quiet chaos. Vivian pushed open the bedroom door one evening to find Rowan leaning against the window, a book in hand. The late light filtered through gauzy curtains, casting shifting patterns across his shirt, across the stillness of his frame. How long do you plan on sulking? She asked, voice low and controlled from the doorway. Rowan closed the book with care, then looked up at her. I'm not sulking. Then why have you stopped taking care of things? She stepped closer. The subtle scent of cedar wood trailed behind her, elegant and deliberate. Still upset about last time? I'm not upset. He placed the book gently on the side table. I just don't care anymore. Vivian narrowed her eyes. Her long fingers tapped once, twice on the desk beside him. Explain. I'm tired, he said quietly. There are staff here. They can handle it. He thought back to his former life. The early mornings, the rigid routines. Vivian's coffee had to be exactly the right temperature. The toast golden, the sandwiches crisp. The children's clothes hand-washed, their socks ironed smooth. And for what? So Vivian could pour her tenderness into Lucian. So the children could curl into Lucian's arms like he was their home. So he could die, on his 62nd birthday, surrounded not by family, but by flames. Alone. Forgotten. Rowan. Her voice dropped, colder now. Sharper. If you're throwing a tantrum, just say it. Don't act like a 3-year-old. He gave a faint tug at the corner of his mouth. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I'm just tired. Before she could reply, the door slammed open. Aiden and Maya came charging in, their small faces flushed with outrage. Daddy's lazy. Maya shouted, her voice high and shrill. We want Uncle Lucian to take care of us. Aiden followed suit, arms crossed, chin jutted out. Uncle Lucian's way more patient than you. He works harder. He's like 10,000 times better. Vivian didn't react. Her gaze stayed fixed on Rowan's face, waiting for him to backpedal, to apologize, to give in. But he didn't. Instead, he exhaled slowly and said, calmly, "If you all think he's better, then bring him in. I won't stop you." The air shifted. Thickened. Vivian's expression hardened, something dark flickering behind her eyes. "You're sure about that?" "I am," Rowan replied. "Absolutely." Maya squealed with delight and tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, let's go now. I want Uncle Lucian to come over right now. With him around, we don't need you at all." Aiden yelled, sticking out his tongue. "Go away. Leave this house." Vivian glanced back one final time. Rowan didn't flinch. Didn't blink. She turned without a word and walked out, kids in tow, heels striking the floor with sharp finality. The front door slammed. Moments later, the engine of her car hummed to life and faded down the road. Rowan remained where he stood, alone. He closed his eyes as the silence settled in around him. Soon, they would get exactly what they wanted. He would leave. Not in anger. Not in protest. He would simply disappear, from them, and from this house that had never truly been his. On Lucian's very first day living there, he took command of the house like it had always been his. "These couches are so heavy," he said lightly, fingers grazing the dark leather as if it offended him. He turned to Vivian with a soft, almost teasing smile. "Vivian, how about something in cream? Something warmer?" Vivian didn't blink. She turned to the butler without hesitation. "Mr. Davenport, make it happen, just as Lucian wants." From the stairwell landing, Rowan watched in silence as movers carried out the sofas he and Vivian had once spent weeks picking out, half a year ago. She'd been so particular about the stitching, the grain of the leather. None of that mattered now. Aiden and Maya trailed behind Lucian like excited little shadows, pointing and whispering with glee. "Uncle Lucian, we have to get rid of these pillows too," Maya declared. "Dad picked them. They're so ugly." Lucian chuckled, tousling their hair. "All right, we'll replace all of them." Rowan's fingers curled into the banister. Then relaxed. Those pillows? He had hand-sewn them himself, stitch by stitch, during Vivian's pregnancy. Stuffed them with hypoallergenic down because the twins had been born with sensitive skin. Now, they were tossed into the trash without a second thought. Over the next few days, the house began to feel foreign. At the dining table, Lucian now sat where Rowan used to. He leaned in to serve the children their food with practiced ease, laughing with them between bites. Sometimes, Vivian would even pour Lucian a cup of coffee herself. She'd slide it over with slender fingers, her expression soft in a way Rowan had never seen directed at him. At night, the lights in the living room would dim for movie time. All four of them, Vivian, Lucian, Aiden, and Maya, tucked into the couch like a picture-perfect family. Maya curled into Lucian's arms. Aiden rested his head on Vivian's shoulder. Laughter echoed through the hall. Rowan would walk past quietly. No one looked up. No one noticed. He had become invisible in his own home. A ghost watching strangers live the life he once built. The cruelest part? Once upon a time, Vivian, Aiden, and Maya had held impossibly high standards for everything. Nothing less than perfection would do. And now? Rowan watched as Lucian casually dropped her six-figure Rolex face down on the marble table, and Vivian simply laughed, slipping it onto her wrist like it was a love token. He watched the kids skip off to school in uniforms Lucian had tossed into the washer without even checking the settings, stiff collars stained with yesterday's sauce. They didn't care. They were happy. He watched Lucian pour takeout into porcelain bowls and lie with ease. "Made it myself. No one questioned him. And the most ridiculous part? They adored Lucian, this man who wasn't even related to them, more than they had ever loved him. "Lucian, don't lift a finger," Vivian murmured, stopping him mid-reach as he went to clear the plates. Her long fingers pressed gently against his wrist. "Your hands are made for the piano, not chores. Let me carry your bag." Aiden chirped, hurrying to grab Lucian's limited-edition briefcase like a prized possession. The eagerness on his son's face, Rowan had never seen it directed at him. "Mr. Armitage," Mr. Davenport said with solemn respect, handing Lucian a pair of hand-stitched Italian slippers. "You just focus on resting. We'll handle the rest." The irony was bitter. Rowan had spent 6 years doing exactly that, serving, fixing, anticipating every need. And he had been invisible. Now Lucian shows up, and suddenly, he's gravity. The center of their universe. Even the staff had started whispering behind closed doors. "I've never seen Madam treat Mr. Armitage like that. She spoils him. And the kids? They're glued to him. I swear, it's only a matter of time before the master of this house changes." Rowan didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. His heart had long since gone cold. He just kept packing his things, one drawer at a time. Until that afternoon, when his phone lit up with a dozen missed calls. Buzzing. Vibrating. Non-stop. "Sir," a panicked voice shouted the moment he picked up. "The children, they had an allergic reaction at school. An ambulance already took them to the hospital." Rowan dropped everything and ran. By the time he reached the ER, both kids had already been wheeled into the trauma unit. White lights. Rushed footsteps. No one had answers yet. And Rowan, forgotten, ignored, irrelevant, was the only one who showed up. Vivian stood in the hallway, her coat draped loosely over one arm, her gaze sharp with fury. "Rowan," she said, voice low, tight with barely contained rage. "What the hell did you do?" Rowan blinked, stunned. "What?" "They're allergic to mangoes. Don't tell me you didn't know." She stepped closer, her presence cutting through the sterile corridor like a blade. Her slim frame cast a long, cold shadow over him. "Why did you let them drink mango juice?" "It wasn't me," Rowan said, meeting her eyes head-on. "I never bring mangoes into the house." Ever since the first allergy scare, he'd been meticulous, checking labels, warning everyone, even personally vetting the school cafeteria menu. There was no way he would have made that mistake. "Oh, not you?" Vivian laughed, bitter and sharp. "So what, a maid? Or maybe the kids just decided to poison themselves." Rowan opened his mouth to respond, but the nurse pushed through the door. "They're awake." Inside the hospital room, Aiden and Maya lay pale and still beneath crisp white sheets. Their eyes flicked up the moment Vivian and Rowan entered. "What happened?" Vivian asked, her voice steel under silk. The children looked at each other, just a glance. And then pointed straight at Rowan. "It was Dad," Aiden said. "He gave us snacks with mango in them." Maya added, her voice cracking. "He knew we were allergic. He did it on purpose." Rowan froze. The blood drained from his face. "What did you just say?" "It was Daddy." Maya cried. "He knew." Aiden nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "He's mean. He wanted to hurt us." Rowan gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles went white. "Do you even understand what you're saying right now?" His voice shook, not with guilt, but disbelief. "You better tell the truth. Right now." "Enough." Vivian snapped upright and seized his wrist with a force that startled even him. "This is your idea of fatherhood? Poisoning them and then threatening them to lie?" "I didn't," Rowan's voice wavered. His throat tightened with something sharp and bitter. "Oh, so now they're framing you," she spat. "They're children, Rowan. What, you think they're masterminds now? You think they'd invent something like this just to ruin you?" The children burst into tears. Vivian immediately let him go and turned to comfort them, brushing back their damp hair, murmuring gentle words Rowan couldn't hear. He stood frozen at the threshold, like a man watching his own funeral through glass. But the more they cried, the more hysterical they became. Their cheeks flushed, splotchy with red. "Mama," Maya whimpered between sobs, "we feel so awful." Vivian leaned in, her voice low, gentle, wiping the tears from her daughter's face. "What would make you feel better?" Aiden's eyes, still wet, locked onto Rowan like a blade. "He's allergic to mango too. Make him drink it. Make him hurt like we did." Something inside Rowan snapped, and then went cold. He turned toward Vivian. For a split second, he hoped, pleaded silently, for a reason. But her expression sent a chill through his veins. She stood, slow and deliberate, and snapped her fingers. 2 bodyguards entered without a word. "Hold him down." Before he could move, Rowan was shoved into a chair. A strong hand clamped down on his jaw, forcing his mouth open. A full liter of mango juice was poured down his throat. The sickly sweetness burned. It flooded his lungs, choked his breath, tore at his throat. He gasped, coughed violently, trying to fight, but it was useless. He could feel it happening, his skin erupted in angry welts, red and raw. His throat swelled. His breathing turned shallow, strained. His fingers clawed at his neck as if that might save him. Through blurred vision, he looked to Vivian. She just stood there. Watching. Unblinking. Unmoved. The children? They weren't crying anymore. They were clapping. Cheering. "Serves you right." Maya squealed. "You deserved it." "Yeah." Aiden grinned. "Now you know how we felt." The world began to tilt, blacken at the edges. And the last thing Rowan saw before it all faded. Vivian's eyes. Cold. Empty. He didn't know how long he was out. But when Rowan came to, he was in a hospital bed. His throat was scorched raw. His skin still itched and stung with fading hives. Outside the room, voices carried through the hallway. "Lucian. Vivian, I swear, I had no idea they were allergic. I just wanted to make them something nice." Vivian's voice was impossibly soft. "It's not your fault. You didn't know." "I should have said something sooner," Lucian sighed. "If I had, maybe you wouldn't have misunderstood Mr. Everly. Maybe none of this would have happened." Then the children's voices, clear, guilty, and small. "We're sorry, Uncle Lucian," Maya sniffled. We just didn't like Daddy." "Yeah," Aiden chimed in. "He's always so strict. No snacks. Early bedtimes. We just wanted him to leave." Rowan lay frozen beneath the sheets. His fingers clenched the hospital blanket in a silent scream. Knuckles white. Heart burning. So this was it. These were the children he had sacrificed everything for. He remembered the night Aiden was 2 and burning up with fever. The house had been empty. Silent. He called Vivian, her assistant picked up. "She's in a critical meeting," they said. "Can't be disturbed." So he had stayed up all night, alone, rocking their son through the chills and convulsions, whispering lullabies through gritted teeth, heart pounding with fear. Maya had been born frail, her immune system weak. Rowan had spent sleepless weeks researching nutrition plans, trying experimental treatments, reading every published paper on pediatric care. Vivian? She had been on a plane to Tokyo, securing a multinational merger. And now, these 2 children he had poured his soul into? They had become the sharpest knives in his chest. He clutched his heart, body curling with pain that went deeper than skin. Tears spilled freely. He couldn't stop them. He held himself and waited for it to pass. Then his phone rang. It was the airline. "Mr. Everly," the voice on the line said, calm and professional. "Your one-way ticket to Rainhaven City has been confirmed. Would you like to select a seat?" Rowan wiped his face, hand trembling. His voice barely a whisper. "Window seat, please." "Thank you." The moment he hung up, the door swung open. Vivian walked in, as poised as ever, heels sharp, skirt crisp, not a strand of hair out of place. "Who were you on the phone with?" she asked casually, as if discussing groceries. "A friend," Rowan murmured, placing the phone aside. She didn't press. Just stood beside his hospital bed, tall and flawless, eyes steady on him. "About last time," she said. "It was Lucian. He's the one who gave them the mango juice." Her tone was flat, as if reciting a weather report. "But he didn't know. So let's put it behind us." Something twisted in Rowan's chest. Hard. Violent. He couldn't breathe. When she thought it was him, she was ready to burn him alive. But now that it was Lucian? Just a misunderstanding. Just, not his fault. Rowan opened his mouth. He wanted to scream. To throw it all in her face. Every sleepless night. Every sacrifice. Every smile he earned and every cold shoulder he endured. But all that came out was a breath. Barely a sound. Okay. That was it. He sank back into the bed, like someone who had finally run out of fight. All the hurt that had once kept him awake at night, all the injustice, the helpless rage, drained out of him in silence, leaving only the hollow echo of a laugh he couldn't bring himself to make. So that's what it came down to, wasn't it? The difference between being loved and not being loved. It really was that simple. Vivian seemed slightly thrown by his lack of reaction. She paused, searching his face. "The kids are heading to summer camp next week," she said finally. "Lucian and I will be going with them. You'll return home on your own." She waited. Waited for the usual protest, the pleading, the emotion, the desperate reach for relevance. But Rowan just nodded. Calmly. "I understand." She frowned. Something about him was different. Distant. But just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "Work. I have to go." The door clicked shut behind her. Rowan slowly opened the fist he hadn't realized he'd been clenching. For crescent-shaped cuts glared red in his palm. The next few days, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Message after message. All from Lucian. Photos. Videos. Updates from camp. Smiling faces. Lake swims. Group hikes. And in one clip, the children proudly introducing him to their friends. "This is our dad." Aiden beamed into the camera. Gasps of awe rippled from the crowd of kids. "Whoa, your dad's so cool. Your mom's pretty, and your dad's handsome. You're so lucky." A little girl asked innocently. "Then who's that man who picks you up from school sometimes?" There was a beat. A flicker of hesitation. Then Maya smiled politely. "Oh. That's our butler." Rowan dropped the glass in his hand. It shattered against the floor in a burst of ceramic shards and splashing water. He knelt to clean it, but paused. The pieces glinted up at him like teeth. And suddenly, he laughed. Not bitter. Not loud. Just quiet. Steady. So that's what he'd been all these years. Not a father. Not a husband. Just a free live-in butler. But it's all right. He was resigning. Effective immediately. Let their perfect dad handle things from now on. 1 week later, Mr. Davenport dropped Aidan and Maya off at the villa. The moment they burst through the front door, they made a beeline for the kitchen, faces beaming with smug delight. "Dad!" Maya called out, her voice sharp and piercing. "Guess what?" Uncle Lucian twisted his ankle at the parent-child relay race. Mom was so worried about him. Aidan jumped in, breathless with excitement. Mom booked the entire hospital just for him. Cancelled all her meetings, she stayed by his side the whole time. Rowan stood quietly at the oven, sliding on his mitts with practiced calm. He said nothing. "Are you even listening?" Maya demanded, stomping her foot. "Mom treats Uncle Lucian way better than." A soft ding interrupted her tirade. The oven timer. The scent of warm sugar filled the air as Rowan pulled the cake from the oven. Both kids leaned in instantly, eyes wide. "Cake!" Aidan cried, bouncing on his toes. "I want some." Rowan inspected the edges. "Burnt." Without a word, he turned and dumped the entire cake into the trash. "What?" Maya shrieked. "Why did you do that?" "It was overcooked," Rowan said evenly. "Can't eat it." "You're lying." Aidan screamed, kicking the trash can. "You did it on purpose. You're still mad about camp, that's why you won't let us eat it. You're the worst dad ever." Maya's cheeks flushed scarlet. "You're not our dad anymore. We don't want a dad like you." Rowan removed the mitts slowly, his heartbeat pounding behind his ribs like a war drum. He looked at the two children he had poured his life into, and saw strangers. "Good," he said, voice almost gentle. "Because I don't have children like you either." He turned away. "From now on," he said, "go ask Lucian. He's all yours." He headed for the stairs. Behind him, the kitchen exploded into screams. "We hate you. We hate you forever." Rowan paused for a breath, but didn't turn back. Then. A violent shove. "Go die." His world flipped. The stairs. The air. The floor rushing up. He crashed down the steps, his body a rag doll against the hardwood. Bones cracked. Pain tore through him. Then warmth. Something hot began to trickle from his temple, clouding his vision in a crimson blur. At the top of the stairs, the two children stood side by side, smirking. "Serves you right." Maya clapped her hands, giggling. "That's what you get for not letting us eat the cake." Aidan stuck out his tongue and made a face. Rowan groaned, blood dripping steadily from his chin, pooling on the polished floor beneath him. He tried to lift himself, using the wall as leverage. Every breath seared. Every movement lit his nerves on fire. And still, what hurt more than the fall was the sight of them. These weren't the children he had once carried through fevered nights and hospital corridors. These were strangers. Little monsters in the shape of what he used to love. The front door burst open. "What happened?" Vivian's voice was low, alert. Lucian stepped in behind her, both of them freezing at the sight before them. "Mommy," the children cried in perfect unison, crocodile tears springing forth like reflex. "He threw away the cake." Maya wailed, running into her arms. "And he said he didn't want us anymore. He's so mean." Aidan sobbed. "He scared us." Vivian's eyes flicked from the overturned cake in the trash to Rowan, bloodied, breathless, bracing against the wall. Her brows drew tight. "Rowan," she said sharply, "why do you always insist on fighting with the children?" Her voice sliced the air, cold, clipped, merciless. "To say something like that to your own flesh and blood, are you even worthy of being called a father?" Rowan straightened slowly, his collar soaked with blood, his vision swimming. And then he laughed. It was raw. Quiet. The laugh of a man who's reached the edge, and finally looked down. "In your eyes," he rasped, "when was I ever worthy?" Vivian's expression faltered for a second, but he kept going. "You never saw me as anything more than a babysitter," Rowan said. "A background figure to make sure your life stayed perfect." Vivian's pupils narrowed. Rowan wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. "You want Lucian to be your husband. The kids want him as their father. Fine." He looked at them all, Vivian, Lucian, the children, like he was finally seeing the picture they'd been painting without him. "I'm stepping down. You can have your picture-perfect family of 4. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Vivian's face darkened. Her jaw clenched. She stared at him like she was only just realizing who she had married, and who she had broken. "Don't forget," she said quietly, voice like a blade against glass, "this was always a business deal between our families. There was never supposed to be love." She tilted her head, eyes glinting with the cruelest kind of clarity. "You wanted love? That's your mistake. I don't do love." Rowan chuckled. Then he broke. Laughter shook him. But somewhere in the sound, tears were falling, unnoticed. Of course. She was right. He'd been a fool. A fool to think he could pull a goddess down from her pedestal. A fool to believe she could ever be human, his. She had come down, once. But not for him. Never for him. And he should have known that a long, long time ago. "All right," Lucian said gently, reaching for Vivian's arm at just the right moment. "The kids are shaken. Let's take them upstairs." Vivian paused, eyes locking on Rowan one last time. Then she turned away. One child in each arm. Lucian by her side. And just like that, they were gone. Rowan stood still, blood still dripping from his brow, staining the floor like ink. He'd never regretted anything more. Not the marriage. Not the house. Not even the career he gave up. No, he regretted them. He regretted marrying Vivian. He regretted fathering those 2 children. In this lifetime, there would be no more second chances. No more sacrifices. No more begging for a place in someone else's story. From now on, he would live for himself. Only for himself. 3 days later, it was Aiden's birthday. The party was held at the city's most luxurious hotel. A ballroom bathed in light. Crystal chandeliers cascading over champagne towers, every corner gleaming with money and curated perfection. Vivian had reserved the entire floor. It was a celebration for the world to see. Rowan stood in a shadowed corner. Aiden and Maya flanked Lucian, each clinging to one of his hands like butterflies orbiting their chosen son. They laughed, twirled, posed for photos. The biological father, forgotten, sidelined, a formality in a suit. Vivian stood not far off, champagne glass in hand, the curve of her mouth calm, her gaze drifting often to Lucian. There it was again. That warmth. That softness. The look she had never given Rowan in all their years together. Guests whispered nearby, their voices sharp and careless. "Winter is devoted, I'll give her that," one woman murmured, sipping her drink. "After all these years, it's still Armitage she looks at." "Can't blame the kids either," another voice chimed in. "They take after her." All eyes on Armitage. Rowan stayed quiet, rooted like stone, each word a needle to the skin, but no longer to the heart. "I knew them back in college," a man in a tailored tux whispered. "Winter and Armitage? That was real. Damn near proposed before graduation." "No wonder," someone muttered, "even without the title of husband, he'll always be the one. Some people claw their way in, marriage, kids, the whole thing," another scoffed. "But what's the point? You can't manufacture love. that guy? A glance shot toward Rowan, laced with pity and disdain. He was never going to win. Some men are just meant to be alone. Rowan said nothing. Didn't flinch. The words didn't cut anymore. His chest was heavy, yes, but no longer aching. Just quiet. Numb. As if the heart had frozen over completely, preserving whatever was left for one final, cold goodbye. He took a long, steady breath and turned away from the celebration. Then he walked toward the elevator. The doors began to close just as a hand reached through, forcing them open with a mechanical chime. Lucian stepped inside, shoes polished to a mirror shine, a slight smile on his lips. 3 more days until the divorce waiting period is up, he said, locking eyes with Rowan. You'll be leaving like you promised, right? Rowan pressed the button for the first floor. Of course, he said, voice flat. I want out more than anyone. Lucian's smile widened, satisfied. Good. I'll take care of everything you're leaving behind. Vivian, the kids, they don't want you anyway. Soon, you'll be nothing more than a memory. Rowan didn't reply. The elevator began its slow descent. And then... boom! A violent jolt rocked the cabin. The lights snapped out. Everything plunged into black. Ah! Lucian screamed. He fumbled for his phone. Vivian. Help. The elevator, something's wrong. Rowan slammed hard into the wall. Pain bloomed across his skull. Something wet trickled down his cheek. Time blurred. Then, voices. Footsteps. Metal scraping against metal. Is anyone inside? A rescuer called through the twisted doors. Help us. Lucian shouted, banging the wall. My legs stuck. Sparks flared. A harsh light cut through the darkness. The elevator doors were slowly being pried open. A helmeted responder leaned inside, surveyed the damage, and turned to the woman behind him. Ms. Winter, he said grimly. Both men's legs are pinned. We only have time to extract one right now. Who should we pull out first? Through his blood-misted vision, Rowan saw her. Vivian. Standing calmly behind the search team, her children at her side. Her eyes moved to Lucian. And without hesitation, she said. Get Lucian out first. Save Uncle Lucian. Maya sobbed. Please. Hurry. Yeah. Aiden added, grabbing the rescuer's sleeve. Save him first. The rescuer frowned. Ma'am, the other man's injuries are more severe. We recommend. I said get Lucian, Vivian snapped. Her voice like ice cracking across still water. The rescuer hesitated, then obeyed. They reached in for Lucian. Carefully. Gently. As they pulled him free, the elevator shuddered. The warp door groaned. Crash. A section of twisted metal collapsed onto Rowan's leg. Agony tore through him, white-hot and blinding. He couldn't scream. Could barely breathe. And through the haze, he saw it. Vivian. Holding Lucian upright. The children dancing around them, relieved and smiling. Rowan was still trapped. Still bleeding. And they were already walking away. Then everything went dark. When Rowan opened his eyes again, a harsh white light forced him to squint. The sterile sting of disinfectant filled his nose. Somewhere to his left, a heart monitor beeped in steady rhythm. You're awake. A doctor stepped over, flashlight in hand, checking his pupils. 3 broken ribs. You're lucky we got to you in time. A little later, and you wouldn't be here. Rowan stared blankly at the ceiling. In his mind, the elevator was still falling. He saw it again, Vivian standing behind the rescue team, eyes locked on Lucian, not even glancing his way. He tried to move. Pain ripped through his chest like a slow explosion. But strangely, he didn't cry. Not a single tear. Maybe the pain had bled him dry. Maybe his heart had finally gone numb. 3 days later, Vivian came to take him home. She stood at the door of his hospital room, gaze fixed on the bandages that wrapped his chest like armor. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "Lucian plays piano," she said. "I couldn't risk an injury to his legs." Rowan lifted his head slowly. Their eyes met. "So," she continued, voice smooth, calm, utterly detached. "You had to be the one. It doesn't affect your work. You don't move much anyway." She might as well have been commenting on the weather. Rowan didn't answer. He just looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he had loved for half his life stood before him like a marble statue. Graceful. Impeccable. And utterly hollow. There was no trace of him in her eyes. "Vivian," he said, voice low and torn. "If I died in that elevator, would you have cared?" Vivian's brow twitched. But she said nothing. Instead, she reached into her suit jacket and pulled out a sleek black Amex Centurion card. She placed it on the bedside table. "Don't ask meaningless questions," she said coolly. "Consider that compensation. As long as you stay in line, raise the kids, and don't embarrass me. You'll always be my husband." Rowan smiled. But it wasn't warm. Last time around, he'd carried the title of husband all the way to the grave. And what had it gotten him? He died alone. Forgotten. Burned alive, while they vacationed in paradise. So this time? No. This time, he wouldn't wear that title like a shackle. This time, he'd rise, brighter, freer. This time, he'd belong to someone who truly loved him. He couldn't hold it in anymore. The words hovered on the edge of his tongue, desperate to be spoken. "Vivian, I." But the shrill ring of her phone sliced through the moment. She answered with a swift flick of her thumb. Lucian's warm voice came through the speaker. "Vivian, I'm at the restaurant with the kids, we've got a little surprise for you." Her eyes softened instantly. "I'll be right there," she said, her tone suddenly warm, almost girlish. Then she hung up. Checked her watch. And just like that, her face turned cold again. "I have to go. The driver's waiting downstairs." She turned without a second glance. Rowan stood there, fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his palm. The words he'd been about to say shriveled into silence. No. Let her go. Soon, she'd find out on her own. The divorce had been finalized. He didn't want her anymore. Didn't want the title. Didn't want the children who looked through him like he was made of glass. Rowan made a call to the staff. "Send my luggage to the airport." An hour later, he erased Vivian's number from his phone. All of them. Every trace. Then he opened the drawer, left the Centurion card inside without a second thought, and walked away. As the plane took off, the sky outside the window exploded in gold and crimson. Sunlight spilled across the clouds like a blessing. Rowan leaned his head back, gazing out at the glowing horizon. Then he smiled, quietly, peacefully, and closed his eyes. This time, he would never beg again. Never shrink himself for love. Never kneel at the feet of someone incapable of seeing him. The days of silent suffering and one-sided devotion. Let them vanish with this flight, lost forever in the skies behind him. What waited ahead was something new. A life that belonged to him. And only him. Rowan had arrived in Rainhaven. The city was unfamiliar, but that was precisely what comforted him. It didn't carry his past. It didn't know his name. He spent 2 quiet weeks exploring, walking its winding streets with a notebook in hand and silence as his companion. Eventually, he found it, a narrow, quiet road tucked deep in the old quarter. That's where he opened Sublime, a small bookstore with tall windows and gentle morning light. The space was modest, but bright. And it was his. He spent 3 months restoring it. He peeled away the cracked wallpaper, sanded the old floors, and replaced the rusted signage with warm oak and gold leaf lettering. When he was done, Sublime wasn't just a bookstore. It was a home, for books, for rainy afternoons, and maybe, someday, for something more. Rainhaven's wet season had settled in early. The sky outside was a soft slate gray, and rain tapped rhythmically against the windowpanes. Rowan stood at the glass front door, arms loosely crossed, watching the drizzle blur the cobblestone street. A bell chimed behind him. Crisp. Clear. "Welcome in," he said automatically, turning toward the door. And froze. A woman stood in the entryway, tall and elegant beneath a black long-handled umbrella. Rainwater dripped onto the wooden floor as she stepped inside, holding a little girl in her arms. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. She had twin braids and was burying her face shyly into the woman's shoulder. "Do you have any picture books for this age?" the woman asked, closing her umbrella. Her voice was soft, easy. Familiar. Rowan finally saw her face. Well-defined features. Warm, expressive eyes. Long hair cascading casually over one shoulder. She was smiling. "Celia," he said, stunned. She blinked. Her gaze searched his face for a beat, then lit up with recognition. "Rowan?" She laughed. "I almost didn't recognize you." Memories surged like a flood. Celia. 2 years ahead of him in med school. Brilliant. Composed. She'd been the name on everyone's lips, top of her class, a gifted pianist, graceful to the point of untouchable. Every guy in the department had fallen for her at least once. Rowan included. "What a coincidence," he said, smiling despite himself. He nodded toward the little girl in her arms. "And this is my brother's daughter," Celia said, patting the girl gently. "Amber." Amber peeked up, revealing a porcelain-soft face, pink cheeks, and big curious eyes. "Hi," she said shyly. Her voice like spun sugar. Rowan's heart, battered, tired, cautious, suddenly softened. Melted, just a little. He knelt down to meet her gaze, softening his voice. "Hi there, Amber. Looking for a special kind of book? I can help you find one, if you'd like." Amber blinked her big eyes at him, then suddenly reached out, her tiny fingers gently brushing his cheek. "You're really handsome," she whispered. "You look like my daddy." The air shifted. Celia's expression flickered. She crouched quickly, wrapping an arm around Amber, holding her just a little closer. "I'm sorry," she murmured to Rowan, her voice low. Her father passed away a few years ago. It was an illness. Something in Rowan's chest cracked open. He looked at the little girl in front of him, at the absence she carried without even realizing it. Aiden and Maya had Lucian now. This child had no one. "No need to apologize," Rowan said gently, brushing Amber's hair with soft fingers. "Amber, do you like fairy tales? I have so many beautiful storybooks just for you." Amber nodded, her eyes lighting up. The next half hour passed in a warm blur. Rowan crouched beside the shelves, pulling out books one by one, explaining the stories, letting her choose by color, cover, and magic. Amber slowly came out of her shell, giggling softly, asking questions. Eventually, she reached out and took his hand in hers. "Can you read one to me?" she whispered. Celia watched from a distance, her arms folded gently, her gaze softening with something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. When Rowan began reading The Little Prince, Amber curled up beside him on the floor like it was the most natural place in the world. She listened, wide-eyed. And Rowan read like it mattered. At checkout, Celia smiled quietly. "You have a special way with stories," she said. "Amber's usually shy around strangers. She opened up to you right away." Rowan returned the smile, handing the carefully wrapped books to Amber. "When I saw her," he said before thinking, "I felt something familiar. I even thought, if Amber were my daughter, I'd be lucky." As soon as the words left his mouth, regret hit him like a wave. But Celia didn't flinch. She just studied him for a second, then nodded thoughtfully. Said nothing more. At the door, Amber clutched his coat, eyes bright. "Can we come again?" she asked, tilting her head up at him. Rowan crouched again, gently pinching her nose. "Of course. This place is always open for you." Celia smiled, raised the umbrella, and stepped out into the rain, holding Amber close. The little girl turned on her mother's shoulder and waved, her tiny hand fluttering through the mist until they turned the corner and vanished from view. Rowan stayed at the door. Watching. Smiling. Something warm spread through him, quiet, unexpected. Like sunlight breaking through a long stretch of rain. After that day, Celia and Amber became regulars at the bookstore. Nearly every weekend, they would spend a few peaceful hours there. Amber always settled into the little corner armchair with a picture book nestled in her lap, legs swinging, lips moving as she whispered stories to herself. Celia usually sat beside her, deep into a thick medical textbook, the kind most people would never dream of reading for leisure. She read in perfect stillness, only glancing up now and then to check on Amber. Rowan started making it a routine, brewing a light roast coffee for Celia, pouring juice into a small ceramic cup for Amber. Every time, Celia thanked him with a quiet smile and a nod, and Amber would chirp out a sweet little "thank you," before diving right back into her stories. There was a rhythm to it. Something calm. Something whole. One bright Saturday morning, Celia closed her book, stretched slightly, and turned to Rowan. "I was thinking of taking Amber to the amusement park today," she said, her eyes crinkling with a smile. "You should come with us." Rowan hesitated. But then Amber looked up from her picture book, eyes wide, already glowing with hope. "Please," she whispered. And just like that, his answer changed. The amusement park was packed. Voices everywhere. Music, laughter, the scent of caramel popcorn and fresh-cut grass. Amber raced ahead, one hand holding Celia's, the other holding Rowan's. She was bursting with energy, dragging them from one ride to the next. They rode the carousel, choosing the painted white horses. They stood in line for cotton candy and squealed when it melted too fast. They braved the Ferris wheel. When their cabin reached the top, the world stilled. Far below, the park turned miniature, people, rides, sounds fading to a hush. Amber pressed her nose to the glass, then pointed to a patch of white clouds in the sky. "Daddy lives up there," she said. Rowan's chest tightened. Celia pulled Amber gently into her lap, wrapping her arms around her. "Daddy's watching you from heaven," she murmured softly. "And he wants you to be happy, every single day." Amber nodded. Then turned to Rowan with sudden focus. "Rowan uncle," she said, "can you be my new daddy?" The air inside the cabin seemed to freeze. Rowan didn't know what to say. Celia rushed in to smooth it over. "Sweetheart, don't be silly." "I'm not being silly." Amber's cheeks puffed red. "I like Rowan uncle. And he likes me too. Right?" She turned to him, lips trembling, eyes fiercely hopeful. Rowan stared at her. And suddenly, he saw Aiden. The way he used to argue when he believed in something with his whole heart. That same unwavering defiance. That same need to be seen. "I do like Amber," Rowan said gently. "Very much." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But a daddy is someone very special. And no one can ever replace the one you already had. Amber's eyes shimmered with emotion. She didn't cry. She nodded slowly. Then leaned back into Celia's arms. The rest of the ride continued in silence. But it wasn't awkward. It wasn't broken. It was just honest. And that, somehow, was enough. On the way home, Amber fell asleep in the back seat. Her tiny hands were still curled around the stuffed animal Rowan had won for her at the park. Celia drove in silence, occasionally glancing at Rowan in the rearview mirror. "Thank you for coming with us today," she said quietly. She hasn't smiled that much in a long time. Rowan shook his head. "I had a good time too." Outside the window, the sky was a burning watercolor of crimson and gold. The sunlight streamed through the glass, warm and dazzling. Rowan lifted a hand to block it. As he did, the sleeve of his shirt slipped down, revealing a thin, pale scar along his wrist. Celia's gaze flicked toward it. Just for a second. Then she looked away. But for the rest of the drive, her brow remained faintly furrowed. A week later, Celia returned to the bookstore alone. She carried a stainless steel thermos, the kind that fit perfectly in both palms. "I brought you something," she said, setting it on the counter. "It's chamomile tea. I made it myself." Rowan blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" "I thought it might help with sleep," she said softly. Rowan hesitated. "How did you know I've been having trouble sleeping?" He didn't talk about it. He never had. But the nightmares never really left. Even now, even in this quiet city, some nights, he woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air he couldn't find. Celia adjusted her glasses, her eyes calm and knowing behind the lenses. "You forget, I'm a doctor," she said gently. "And I hope, as your friend, it's okay if I notice these things." Rowan instinctively pulled his sleeve down, covering the scar. "I'm sorry," Celia said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry. It's just, whether as a physician or as someone who cares, I hope you'll start taking care of yourself." There was a beat of silence. Then Rowan smiled. A real one. His shoulders softened, and something in his eyes flickered with warmth. "I will," he said. "And thank you, for the tea. If I ever need help," he added, "you'll be the first person I ask." After that, Celia began coming by more often. Sometimes with Amber in tow, sometimes just by herself. Each time, she brought something small. A bouquet of wildflowers. A tin of handmade shortbread. A fresh blend of calming tea. Rowan started to look forward to the sound of the bell over the door. He got used to her laughter drifting across the shelves. Used to Amber curling up in her usual corner with a book, mouthing words to herself. Used to Celia's voice reading aloud softly, like sunlight filtered through leaves. And slowly, without him realizing it, something shifted. One afternoon, Rowan looked up from the register to see them there, Celia leaning against a bookshelf, Amber tucked into her side, both absorbed in a story. And for a brief moment, he felt it. A flicker of something he'd never quite had. Not with Vivian. Not even when he tried his hardest. It was simple. Peaceful. It was the life he'd always longed for. Not grand. Not loud. Just warm. Just real. Just, home. It was a rainy night. Rowan was reorganizing books on the back shelf when the bell above the front door rang. He looked up. Celia stood on the threshold, drenched from head to toe. Amber was in her arms, burning up with fever, her cheeks flushed crimson and damp strands of hair clinging to her temples. "I'm sorry to show up this late," Celia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Amber kept begging to see you. She said she couldn't fall asleep unless you were the one telling the story." Rowan rushed to let them in. He took Amber into his arms carefully, her small body hot and limp against his chest. Her skin felt like fire. He cradled her gently, whispering as he rocked her. "Uncle Rowan's right here, sweetheart. You don't need to be scared." That night, he stayed at her bedside. Amber lay curled beneath a blanket, cheeks still flushed, eyes fluttering with fevered dreams. Rowan sat beside her, speaking softly, one story blending into the next, his voice calm and rhythmic, like the sound of rain on the windows. Celia sat nearby, watching in silence. She didn't interrupt. Just sat with her hands folded in her lap, her expression tender and unreadable. Eventually, Amber's breathing steadied. Her fever dropped, and her little fists unclenched in sleep. Outside, the storm had passed. The rain had stopped. A quiet silver moonlight poured through the gap in the curtains, laying a soft sheen across the wooden floor. "Thank you," Celia whispered. Rowan shook his head and shifted to stand, only to wince as his leg gave out under him, numb from sitting too long. He stumbled. Celia reacted instinctively, catching him by the arms before he could fall. Their faces were suddenly close. Too close. Neither moved. Then, quietly, awkwardly, they stepped apart, both turning their heads as a blush crept up between them. No words. Just silence. But something had shifted. Something soft and fragile, hanging between them in the quiet. Rowan had been gone for over a month before Vivian finally realized something was off. At first, she'd assumed it was just a game, some petty tactic to make her come crawling back. She was used to that. Men sulking, men trying to test her. It bored her. But now, he wasn't answering her calls. Not replying to her messages. Not even through mutual acquaintances. Annoyed, she hung up on yet another one of his friends who said they hadn't heard from him. She turned on her heel and marched into the study. Opened her laptop. Pulled up his financials. Her eyes narrowed. The Amex Centurion she'd given him, the one with no limit, hadn't been touched. Not even once. His departure, it seemed, was funded solely by his own savings. She stared at the screen for a moment, lips twitching into a cold smile. "Well," she muttered. "How noble." With a click, she shut the laptop. So this was his play? Disappear, go off the grid, try to bait them into missing him. Childish. Utterly ineffective. She rose, smoothed her blouse, and walked out of the room. If he thought she'd chase him, he didn't know her at all. The next morning at breakfast, Aiden and Maya were chattering away about school, voices bright, overlapping, lively. Lucian smiled as he poured milk into their glasses, his every movement measured, his charm turned on in soft, polished tones. Every now and then, he'd glance across the table and offer Vivian a gentle smile. On the surface, it was a picture of domestic bliss. Two happy children. A handsome, attentive man. A calm, light-filled kitchen. But something was off. Vivian couldn't name it. She only knew the scene in front of her felt hollow. Like a stage set missing one critical prop. Then Maya turned her wide eyes toward her. "Mommy, next week's the parent-child sports day. Can you come with Uncle Lucian?" Vivian instinctively nodded. "Of course," she said, then paused. "Who usually went with you before? Was it your dad?" The mood shifted instantly. Both kids frowned. "It was him," Aiden muttered, the word "dad" tasting bitter. "But we never wanted him to come. He just stayed home all day, washing clothes, cooking, doing nothing else. He wouldn't even dress up. He never left the house." Aiden's face was tight, withdrawn. Cold. Maya piped up in agreement. "Uncle Lucian always looks so cool and put together. All the other kids say they wish he was their dad." Lucian chuckled modestly, his cheeks coloring. He reached across the table and poured Vivian a cup of coffee. "Here, try this. I asked the maid to make it exactly how you like it." Vivian took a sip. Her brow furrowed almost immediately. "Too sweet. Much too sweet." She set the cup down quietly. Back then, Rowan used to grind the beans by hand. He never got it wrong. He knew she took her coffee black, just 1 spoon of cream. No sugar. Ever. Lucian noticed her expression. "Is it not right?" he asked, concerned. "It's fine," she said. She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve and stood up. "I'm heading to the office." She didn't say more. Didn't need to. In the days that followed, nothing seemed amiss, at least not to the untrained eye. The house looked the same. The routines ticked along. But the texture of the days changed, almost imperceptibly. Lucian, who had never done housework in his life, gave up trying after a few half-hearted attempts. Soon, everything was delegated to the staff. The system still functioned. The kids were fed, the house stayed clean, the bills were paid. But something quiet had left the building. There were no longer soft, perfectly pressed shirts hanging in the closets. No warm glass of milk brought to the bedroom just before bed. No thoughtful dinners, tailored to each person's taste, made from scratch after a long day. No chaos. No fights. No mess. But no warmth either. The house hadn't broken. It had simply stopped feeling like a home. It happened one night. Vivian returned home from a business gala, the hour deep into the night. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she made her way to the living room, dropping onto the couch with a weary sigh. Waving off her assistant, she muttered, "That's all for tonight. Go home." The door shut softly behind them. Silence fell over the house. Vivian pressed her fingers to her temples, rubbing gently at the dull ache building behind her eyes. Then, instinctively, she called out into the emptiness. "Where is everyone?" The question lingered in the air, strange and out of place. Because that's when it hit her. Something was different tonight. Something was missing. There was no hallway light left on for her. No faint glow from the table lamp. No steaming bowl of restorative soup waiting on the coffee table, like there always had been. She frowned and reached for the in-house line. When the maid picked up, Vivian's voice was sharp. "I told you I had an event tonight. Why is there nothing ready when I get home?" A few minutes later, Mrs. Pennington arrived in a rush, still tying her apron, face pale. "I'm terribly sorry, Ms. Winter," she stammered. We didn't mean to neglect anything. It's just that." She hesitated, then confessed. "Everything you're referring to, every night you came home, those things were all done by the mister." Vivian blinked. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low, suspicious. Mrs. Pennington's eyes dropped to the floor. "The soup, the lighting, the hot towel by the bed, all of it. He'd always say it wasn't our place to do it. He wanted to make sure everything was exactly how you liked it. He insisted on doing it himself. If you'd like some soup now, I can try to make." But Vivian had stopped listening. Her chest felt tight, like something invisible had struck it clean through. All this time. He was the one behind it all. She'd always known Rowan cared about the house. Knew he was diligent. Detail-oriented. Quiet. But she'd never understood, until this very moment, just how much he'd been doing. And how little she'd ever acknowledged it. For the first time. Regret didn't feel abstract. It felt real. Like something she could taste in the back of her throat. Vivian stood frozen in the center of the kitchen, staring down at the cold marble countertop. Its pale surface reflected the sharp line of her jaw, clenched tight. Mrs. Pennington stood off to the side, silent, not daring to move. So all these 6 years, Vivian murmured, voice hoarse, he did all this, and never said a word? Mrs. Pennington gave the smallest nod. He never let us step in, she said softly. He used to say your stomach was sensitive. You needed things cooked gently, carefully. He wouldn't trust anyone else with it. Vivian's fingers tapped absently on the stone counter. 6 years. Every single night she came home, no matter how late, no matter how tipsy or drained, there had always been a bowl of warm soup waiting. She had never once thought to ask who had stayed up to make it. Never thought it was him, standing quietly in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, watching the pot, tasting the broth, making sure it was just right. Now she knew. And the weight of it crushed her. Should I maybe try to, Mrs. Pennington ventured. That won't be necessary. Vivian turned and began ascending the stairs. Everyone go get some rest. As she passed the master bedroom, she heard Lucian's steady breathing from within. He shifted slightly in his sleep, the silk bedding rustling with a soft sigh. Vivian paused at the doorway, and for some inexplicable reason, Rowan's face surfaced in her mind. Back when he first moved in. She hadn't even wanted to look at him, much less acknowledge their arranged marriage. She'd go out constantly, using business or social obligations as an excuse. Sometimes she wouldn't come home at all. But no matter how late it was, no matter how often she disappeared, she'd always return to find him there. Rowan would be sitting in the living room, quietly waiting for her. He was a light sleeper. The faintest sound would wake him. More than once, she'd come home at 2 or 3 in the morning and find him curled up on the couch, dozing with the TV still on, its volume turned all the way down. She hadn't cared back then. Not even a glance. She'd go straight to her room as if he were invisible. And yet, he did it anyway. For years. At some point, she couldn't quite place when, things changed. She had begun to slow down as she walked past. Even paused. Even covered him with a blanket. But when had it truly started to shift? It might have been the moment Lucian returned. After that, she was constantly pulled away, helping Lucian get re-established, smoothing his affairs, spending more and more time with him. One day, he asked to meet the children. So she brought Aiden and Maya along. That, perhaps, was the turning point. From then on, they spent more and more time with Lucian. He was around for school events, dinners, birthdays, slowly and quietly taking up space. Rowan noticed. Of course he did. He confronted her once, his voice shaking not with anger, but something far more raw. You're my wife. They're my children. So why is it that every day, you're giving your care, your time, to someone else? He paused. As if the rest of what he wanted to say caught in his throat. When he finally spoke again, his eyes were already rimmed red. Sometimes I wonder, if any of you still know who the real husband is. Who the real father is. But back then, all Vivian could see was Lucian, his ambitions, his charm, his place in the world she thought she belonged to. Rowan's words had struck her as absurd. Jealous, even. She had stared him down, cold and cutting. Maybe you've forgotten, she said. If you hadn't interfered all those years ago. Lucian was meant to be the man of this house. Rowan had stood there, stunned. Not angry. Just, devastated. The way his eyes searched hers, like trying to find something he'd lost, something that maybe had never been there to begin with. And she'd turned away, back then, seeing that pain in his eyes, raw and bewildered, something inside her did stir. But Lucian was the one she truly loved. So she ignored Rowan, standing frozen behind her, and walked away without hesitation. After that day, Rowan never brought it up again. It was as if that conversation had never happened. Vivian took it as a sign of maturity. She was, oddly pleased. He seemed to know his place after all. Still lost in thought, she wandered down the hallway and, without quite knowing why, pushed open the door to the children's room. Aiden and Maya were fast asleep, curled up together like they used to when they were toddlers. On the nightstand, a framed photo showed the two of them with Lucian, beaming, arms slung around each other. Rowan's picture was gone. She didn't even know when it had been taken down. Her gaze lingered on the empty space where it used to be. A hollow spot in the wall. And somehow, that same hollowness echoed in her chest. She didn't return to the master bedroom. Instead, she slipped into one of the guest rooms. The moonlight poured in cold and silent through the window. Vivian went to the liquor cabinet, pulled out a bottle of single malt whiskey, and took a long, burning swig straight from the neck. The sting hit her throat like fire. But it did nothing to settle the restless weight in her heart. After that night, Vivian started traveling more. She'd use business trips as an excuse, slowly making herself scarce at home. Lucian didn't mind at all. In fact, he thrived in her absence. Most days, he was either at the gym or fussing with his hair and wardrobe. With no one left to take Aiden and Maya to school, things unraveled quickly. Lucian, trying to win their affection early on, had gotten into the habit of secretly letting them skip class, taking them out for ice cream, amusement parks, whatever they wanted. Now, they'd learned the pattern. Skipping school became routine. Sometimes they'd disappear all day, hiding out in parks or cafes. No homework. No accountability. The house staff noticed, of course. "Sir," one of the maids said nervously, standing just out of Lucian's line of sight, "the school's been calling, multiple times, actually. The teachers are asking if someone could please come in. The children haven't been showing up for weeks." "They don't listen to us," another added quickly. "We tried, but they don't take orders from the staff anymore. Maybe if you were Mrs. Winter." Lucian raised a hand, cutting them off mid-sentence. "I said I'll handle it," he drawled lazily, lounging on the velvet couch, admiring his freshly styled hair in a nearby mirror. "No need to bother Vivian with this. She's already under enough stress at work. Let's not make her worry unnecessarily, all right?" The call cut off. One of Lucian's friends, lounging on the barstool beside him, chuckled and nudged his shoulder. "Don't tell me you're actually wasting time parenting those two brats," he teased. "Man, marrying a rich knockout is one thing, but inheriting her kids too? Sounds like a headache." Lucian yawned, stretching lazily, eyes gleaming with calculation. "Who said anything about parenting?" He scoffed. "Honestly, I'm hoping they grow up completely useless. Makes it easier for my own kids to claim the inheritance later." Without another word, he picked up his phone again and dialed the school. "Hi, yes, this is Lucian Whitmore, Vivian Winter's fiancé. I just wanted to inform you that the kids won't be attending for a while. There are family matters to handle. No need for concern, and frankly, school isn't a major priority for them at the moment." A pause. "And another thing, Vivian's absolutely swamped with work. From now on, please direct all communication about Aiden and Maya to me. No need to bother her with any of it." He hung up, satisfied. Another problem out of the way. That night, after a late gym session and a long steam shower, Lucian actually came home, a rare occurrence lately. The living room was in chaos, toys scattered everywhere, the TV volume cranked too loud, cushions tossed about like battlefield debris. The moment he stepped in, both kids sprang up like puppies at the sound of a car door. "Lucian!" Maya squealed. "You're back. We missed you so much." Aiden ran up, arms open for a hug. But Lucian didn't smile. Didn't open his arms. Didn't even bend down. His face stayed flat, eyes cold. "Yeah, I got it," he said flatly, brushing past them. "I've got stuff to do. Go entertain yourselves." Aiden blinked, confused. This wasn't the Lucian he remembered. This Lucian didn't ruffle his hair or ask about his favorite superhero or offer him a spoonful of ice cream before dinner. Frustrated, Aiden grabbed a toy and threw it at the floor. No. You said you'd play with us. You promised. Lucian froze. Slowly, he turned around, and when he did, the look in his eyes made both children instinctively step back. What did you just say? He said, voice low, lethal. You think you get to order me around? He took a step forward, towering over them now, voice venomous. Let me make this clear, your mom's marrying me. I'm going to be the head of this house, and nothing in it belongs to your sorry excuse of a father. He leaned in closer, voice barely above a whisper but razor sharp. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if your mom started hating you too. You're his kids, after all. Maya whimpered and clung to her brother. Aiden's face crumpled in silent fear. Gone was the bold boy who used to throw tantrums. Gone was the little prince who once mocked Rowan's quiet presence. Lucian straightened up, gave them one last chilling look, and said. Good. Now you understand. In this house, you answer to me. And next time you raise your voice at me, don't expect kindness in return. With that, he turned on his heel and disappeared up the stairs, leaving behind a living room filled with silence, shattered confidence, and two trembling children. Ever since that night, under Lucian's subtle influence, even the house staff began treating the children as if they were a nuisance. No one drove them to school anymore. No one asked if they'd eaten. Meals were no longer prepared with them in mind. Instead, Aiden and Maya had to wait until Lucian finished dining, then quietly scavenged the leftovers from cold plates and half-eaten dishes. The summer heat bore down on Kingsport like a furnace. Inside the villa, the central AC buzzed softly, but even the cool air felt oppressive. Aiden and Maya lay on the floor of the game room, building Lego castles, their little fingers fumbling with plastic bricks. Every so often, they peeked nervously at Lucian, who stood in front of the gilded mirror, adjusting his tie. Lucian? Maya asked softly. Can we go get ice cream? You said we could, remember? Last week, after their mom had surprised Lucian with a new luxury watch, he'd been in a good mood. With a smirk, he nudged the kids lying on the carpet and said he'd take them out for dessert sometime. Now, Lucian didn't even turn his head. Do I look like I have time for this right now? He snapped. Aiden swallowed hard and found his courage. But you promised. Lucian spun around, tie clenched in his fist. Jesus, are you still whining about that? His voice was sharp enough to cut. You're always begging for food. Ever look in the mirror? You're getting fat. The two children flinched and instinctively huddled together. Since their father left, Lucian's warmth had vanished like a switch flipped. The gentle smiles were gone. All that remained were frowns, snapped words, and eyes that never softened. Go to your rooms, he barked, grabbing a tissue and wiping his fingers like they were somehow soiled by the sight of them. I'm sick of looking at you. Maya's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't dare cry. Last time she cried, Lucian had pinched her thigh, hard, and hissed a threat into her ear. Tell your mother, and I'll throw out every single one of your toys. So she stayed quiet. So did her brother. They picked up their Lego bricks, hands trembling, and disappeared down the hall like shadows. That evening, Vivian did something rare. She told the staff she'd be coming home. By the time she arrived, the kids had already gone to bed. Lucian met her at the door, wearing a silk robe and smelling faintly of aftershave. His skin was smooth, polished like everything else about him, carefully maintained, meticulously presented. Work finally let you breathe, huh? He said softly, reaching for her briefcase. There was a hiccup with the acquisition in Tokyo, Vivian replied, slipping off her blazer. Things are settling now, I'll be home more for a while. She glanced around the living room. Where are the kids? I feel like I haven't seen them in ages. They're asleep. Don't worry, I've been taking excellent care of them. Lucian's arm slid around her waist. His voice dropped a note, like a hint wrapped in affection. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. I was thinking. I could use a new watch. Something that matches the cufflinks you gave me. Vivian barely heard the end of his sentence. She waved a hand, distracted. Pick whatever you want. Just use my Centurion card. The next morning, she finally caught a glimpse of the children at breakfast. But something was off. Aiden and Maya sat silently at the table, barely touching their food. Their faces looked thinner, more angular than she remembered. Something about the way Maya hunched over her bowl, or how Aiden held his spoon like it weighed 100 pounds, tugged at Vivian's instinct. She set down her coffee cup, brows drawing together. What's wrong? Are you feeling sick? And no. Aiden stammered quickly, his voice tight with alarm. His hands were shaking, his spoon clinked noisily against the bowl. Lucian emerged from the kitchen carrying a fruit tray. He offered a soothing smile, completely unfazed. They're fine, he said breezily, setting the tray down. Probably just tired. Right, buddy? He ruffled Aiden's hair as he passed. The boy froze, shoulders stiff, barely whispering a reply. Yeah. Vivian's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then stood up. It's work. I need to head out. As the door shut behind her, Lucian's smile vanished. He reached across the table and snatched Maya's milk away with a sneer. You drink like a sloth. Want to be late again? His voice turned low and sharp. Your mom's home this week. You better behave, go to school, stay quiet, don't start anything. You screw this up for me, I swear. Maya flinched hard, then shoved a piece of toast into her mouth. But it lodged in her throat, and she started coughing, face turning red as she gasped for air. Lucian didn't move. He just stared, disgust curling his lip. Pathetic, he muttered. Just like your useless father. Back at the office, Vivian was neck-deep in documents when her phone started buzzing. It was Mr. Davenport. Ma'am, it's Aiden, he's running a high fever. We're really worried it might get worse. Vivian sat upright, her tone instantly sharp. Did you call the doctor? We did, but... Mr. Armitage said it wasn't urgent. He's gone out to a birthday party. What? Her voice lifted with disbelief. I'm coming home now. Tell the family physician to see him immediately. Rain slammed against the windshield as she rushed back to Kingsport. By the time she arrived, Aiden's face was flushed deep red, his tiny body trembling beneath the sheets. And 4 lines snaked out from his arm as the doctor leaned over him, brows tightly knit. How did it get this bad? Mrs. Winter, the doctor said quietly, he's had a high fever for over 4 hours. If treatment had been delayed any further, it could have developed into pneumonia. His immune system is delicate, he needed care much earlier. A painful weight pressed against her chest. She remembered how Rowan used to notice even the slightest change in the kids. He never needed a thermometer, just a touch to the forehead, a glance at their eyes, and he'd know if something was wrong. Where's Lucian? I haven't seen him, she asked, her voice tight. Mr. Davenport hesitated, then spoke carefully. Mr. Armitage said it was just a mild cold. He didn't want to cancel his plans. Vivian's jaw clenched. She pulled out her phone and dialed Lucian. It rang several times before he finally picked up. In the background, she could hear the thump of bass and bursts of laughter. Vivian? Lucian's voice was lazy, tipsy, like he hadn't grasped the gravity of the moment. Aiden has a high fever, and you're out partying? What? I'll come home right away. Lucian's voice shifted, suddenly nervous. I thought it was just a cold, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was serious, I'll be there in 20. An hour later, he stumbled through the front door in a damp designer suit, his face flushed not from urgency, but leftover champagne and laughter. His eyes were red-rimmed when he stepped toward Vivian, guilt etched across his face. I really didn't know Aiden was this sick. She stared at his perfectly powdered complexion, the faint stench of alcohol still clinging to his skin. A wave of irritation welled up in her chest. But when she looked at the face she'd once longed for so desperately, something inside her softened. Fine, she murmured. Just, don't let it happen again. That night, Aiden's fever finally began to subside. Just as Vivian started to breathe easier, her phone buzzed again. It was her assistant. Ms. Winter, something urgent's come up at the firm. They need you right away. She glanced at her son, fast asleep in the hospital bed, and hesitated. Lucian, can you stay with him for a while? I'll be back as soon as I can. Lucian nodded sweetly, not missing a beat. Of course. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. Vivian rushed out the door. But just as she reached the parking lot, she realized, her car keys were still in the room. Turning back, she headed toward the hospital room, and paused outside the door as voices drifted through the gap. Lucian's voice, sharp and venomous. Little brat. Still faking it? You ruined my whole night. Aiden whimpered, barely audible. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm warning you, Lucian growled. Don't play the victim in front of your mother. Say a word, and I'll make sure you regret it. I won't, Aiden choked out, sobbing softly. I'll be good. Please don't hit me. Humph. You better be. Just like your pathetic father. A rush of ice filled Vivian's veins. The man she'd once trusted, the man she'd nearly given everything to, his mask shattered in a single moment. The door burst open with a violent crash. Lucian whirled around in panic, only to meet the full fury in Vivian's eyes. Wait, Vivian, just let me explain. But she was already moving. The slap cracked across his face like a whip. He stumbled backward, crashing against the wall. His carefully styled hair unraveled, falling messily over his stunned expression. I can't believe I never saw it. So this is what your version of a good dad looks like? Vivian's voice was sharp, brittle as glass. If today you dare to hit him and threaten him, what's next? Will you raise your hand to me too? Get out. Her tone dropped, icy and absolute. Pack up your things. Leave the house tonight. Don't ever let me see your face again. Lucian scrambled to his feet, desperation overtaking him. Vivian, please, I just lost control. I was upset. I love those kids, I really do. I'll treat them right from now on, I swear. Love? She let out a hollow laugh, full of disgust. You call this love, yelling at them? Threatening them? Scaring them into silence? She turned to Aiden, who was huddled in the hospital bed, his face streaked with tears, his small frame trembling. Vivian's heart twisted in agony. How blind had she been? How could she not have seen what kind of fear her children had been living in? Mama. Aiden reached out a timid hand, his wide eyes pleading. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll listen to Uncle. Just please don't throw me away. Vivian dropped to her knees at the side of his bed, taking his burning hand into her own. No, she whispered, voice choked with regret. It's Mama who's sorry. Not you. When she turned back to Lucian, the look in her eyes, disappointment, revulsion, heartbreak, made him instinctively take a step back. I never imagined you were this kind of man. He opened his mouth to speak again, but she had already pressed the call button by the bedside. Security, she said coldly into the intercom. Please escort this man off the premises. Lucian's voice echoed down the corridor as he protested, begged, pleaded, until it faded into silence. Vivian sat down heavily beside the bed. Aiden reached out with trembling fingers and tugged on her sleeve. "Mama," he sniffled. "I miss Daddy. Will you bring him back?" Her throat tightened. She thought of Rowan's back as he walked away. How cold she'd been. How many things she'd done, things she couldn't take back. A new wave of guilt bloomed in her chest. "Mama." She looked up. Maya had woken and was padding across the room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "I miss Daddy too. When is he coming home?" Vivian pulled both children into her arms. She held them close, cradling their small bodies as if to shield them from the pain she had allowed to seep into their world. She had no answer. Only a silence so heavy, it pressed against her ribs, threatening to break her from the inside out. 2 days later, Aiden was finally discharged from the hospital. Back at the estate, the grand living room was cluttered with Lucian's belongings, haphazardly stacked as if he had resisted leaving until the very last second. Lucian stood near the marble staircase, leather shoes planted firmly on the polished floor. His fingers, immaculately manicured, were clutching Vivian's sleeve in a white-knuckled grip, nails digging into her skin. "You can't do this to me." His voice cracked with desperation, tears brimming in his reddened eyes. "We've known each other for 20 years. You're throwing all that away, over this? This?" Vivian yanked her arm free. Her eyes were ice. "You call abusing my children a small thing?" She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A video clip began playing. On it, Lucian was gripping Maya's thigh, hard. The little girl was trembling, her face streaked with silent tears, too afraid to even whimper. "And this one?" Vivian swiped to another clip. It showed Lucian pouring a clear liquid into the children's milk, his expression annoyed and rushed. "You drugged them with sleeping pills," she said, voice trembling with rage. "All so you could go to a party. I can't even comprehend what kind of man does that to a child." Lucian's face turned ghostly pale. "You were spying on me," he spat. "You didn't trust me, this whole time?" "I wasn't spying on you." Her voice dropped an octave. It was low. Cold. Controlled. "I was protecting my home." Just then, a housemaid rushed in from the hallway. Her hands were shaking. "Ms. Winter. I have to say something." Everyone turned to look at her. She pointed directly at Lucian, the hatred in her eyes sharp and undisguised. "He's been manipulating the kids since the very first day he moved in. Always trying to turn them against their father." "You're lying." Lucian snapped, voice shrill. "I'm not," she shouted back, mustering courage. "He'd sneak them candy and toys when Mr. Rowan wasn't around. Then he'd whisper in their ears, saying things like, 'Your dad doesn't let you eat sweets because he doesn't love you.'" Vivian's heart pounded as the maid continued. "I heard him tell Aiden, 'If you want your mom to love you more, you've got to get rid of your dad.' And the very next day, the boy pushed Mr. Rowan down the stairs. I saw it." Vivian's face drained of color. She turned sharply to Mr. Davenport. "Pull up the security footage," she said, voice like steel. Moments later, the living room went dead silent as the screen lit up. There it was. Clear as day. Aiden hesitating at the top of the staircase. Rowan walking past. Lucian watching from the shadows. And then, Aiden pushing. The clip ended in stillness so thick it smothered the room. Vivian stood unmoving, breath shallow, fists clenched at her sides. Lucian didn't speak. He didn't even blink. There was nothing left to say. On the screen, the footage continued. 2 children, Aiden and Maya, stood at the top of the staircase. And then, with chilling precision, they pushed Rowan. The smile on Maya's face twisted into something cruel, and Aiden's expression mirrored it. Rowan stumbled, flailed, then vanished from view down the stairs. And just seconds later, Lucian entered the frame. He stood in the hallway, watching it all unfold, his eyes lit up, a triumphant smile creeping across his face. He didn't look surprised. He looked satisfied. Vivian stood frozen, blood draining from her face. Suddenly, "Mommy!" Maya burst down the stairs, tears streaking her face as she ran into Vivian's arms. "We're sorry," she sobbed. "We want Daddy to come home." Aiden followed right behind, eyes red, lip trembling. "Lucian uncle told us Daddy didn't want us anymore." "Is it true?" Lucian let out a low, mocking laugh. "Oh, it's true, all right. He's done with you. Probably shacking up with some woman by now." He took a step forward, smirking. "You know what, Vivian? That property document you signed the other day? That wasn't about any house. That was the divorce agreement Rowan handed over himself. You're not even his wife anymore. He left you, because you made him. You drove him away." Crack. Another slap. This time harder than the last. Lucian reeled backward, hand flying to his cheek. His expression morphed from smugness to stunned disbelief. Vivian's hand hovered in the air, her chest rising and falling with fury. Her eyes were ablaze. She turned to Mr. Davenport. "Throw out everything that belongs to him," she said coldly. "Anything I paid for, he doesn't get to keep a damn thing. You've lost your mind." Lucian screamed, his voice breaking. "Over that old man?" "Shut up." Vivian's voice cut like a blade. "Say one more word, and I'll make sure you never work in Kingsport again." The staff didn't hesitate. Suitcases. Boxes. Designer coats. Limited edition figurines. Expensive watches. All of it, thrown out the front door. They landed on the steps in a chaotic heap, gleaming under the porch light like the remains of a man's false identity. "You'll regret this." Lucian shrieked, standing outside in disbelief. "You think Rowan will take you back? He hated being married to you." The front door slammed shut in his face. His shouting continued, but inside the estate, everything had already fallen silent. Only the echo of the truth, and everything it had shattered, remained. The living room fell into a heavy, unbearable silence. Vivian slowly knelt down, pulling the two children into her arms. Their small bodies trembled against her, warm tears soaking through the fabric of her tailored blazer. "Does Daddy really not want us anymore?" Maya whimpered, her voice barely audible. Vivian's throat tightened. She saw again the image of Rowan's back as he walked away for the last time, the firm way he didn't look back. The divorce papers she'd signed without a second thought. And now, the weight of those choices settled in her chest like a stone. "No," she said softly, though it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself. "Your father loved you so much. He wouldn't just leave. He might just need time, some space." "Then why won't he come back?" Aiden asked, his tear-filled eyes searching hers, his face clouded in guilt. "Is it because we pushed him down the stairs?" Vivian had no answer. The words caught in her throat. All she could do was gently wipe the tears from Aiden's cheeks and whisper, "Mommy will find Daddy. I promise." When the housekeepers came to take the children upstairs, she finally allowed herself to collapse into the couch. She pulled out her phone and dialed her assistant. "Find Rowan," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Now." After hanging up, her eyes drifted to the family portrait above the fireplace. It had been taken 3 years ago. Rowan stood on the edge, his smile stiff, almost like it had been pasted on. She hadn't noticed it at the time. Back then, all her focus had been on the children, the lighting, her own posture in the photo. Not on him. Never on him. Maybe that was when it had started, the slow erosion. Her blindness. His silence. And finally, his decision to walk away. "Dinner is ready, ma'am," Mr. Davenport said gently from the doorway. "Shall I call the children down?" Vivian nodded, her brows drawn together. "I'll eat with them tonight." In the dining room, Aiden and Maya sat listlessly at the table, poking at their food in silence. There were no fights, no laughter, just two shadows of the bright, spoiled children they once were. Their cheeks had thinned. Even their jaws looked sharper, bonier. Maya suddenly looked up, her voice small. All the sass and defiance from before had melted away. "Mommy. I miss Daddy. Where did he go? Why hasn't he come back?" Aiden didn't speak. But the way he glanced over told Vivian he was thinking the same. "Do you think, if you find him, he'll forgive us?" Maya asked quietly. Vivian paused, her spoon frozen midair. Then she nodded slowly. "No matter what happened, he's still your dad. And he used to love you more than anything in the world." Her voice grew firmer. "He'll forgive you. I know he will." Late at night, with the house cloaked in silence, Vivian stood alone in the study, her face dimly lit by the flickering screen. She had been watching the surveillance footage from the past 6 months, frame by frame, moment by moment. In the recordings, Rowan moved quietly through the house. Doing laundry. Cleaning the floors. Cooking dinner. Always tending to the children. Always waiting for her to come home. He rarely smiled. But whenever the kids needed him, he was there, instantly, without fail. Then came that day. The day the children pushed him down the stairs. And she hadn't even looked back. Vivian shut the laptop, chest tightening. She clenched her jaw and took a breath. When she found Rowan again, she would make things right. Now she stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, her fingers rhythmically tapping against the polished mahogany desk. Photos lay scattered before her like shards of broken glass, each one sharper than the last. "Are you certain it's him?" Her voice was low. Too low. The assistant swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Absolutely, ma'am. Mr. Rowan's been running a bookstore in Rainhaven. We took these just last week." The photos showed Rowan standing outside a quaint shop named Sublime. Sunlight filtered through the sycamore leaves, casting soft shadows across his shoulders. He wore a plain linen shirt, his hair shorter than she remembered. In one photo, he bent down to speak gently to a little girl, no more than 5 or 6. His expression, calm, warm, was one she hadn't seen in years. But the most jarring part wasn't Rowan. It was the woman beside him. Petite. Soft-eyed. Looking at Rowan like he was someone worth staying for. In the next photo, Rowan held the little girl in his arms. The three of them, Rowan, the child, and the woman, stood together under the dappled light. Looking more like a family than Vivian could bear to admit. Her eyes narrowed. "And this woman beside him?" she asked, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. The assistant hesitated. "She's Celia Montrose, went to college with Mr. Rowan. The girl's her late brother's daughter. From what we've learned, they weren't particularly close back then, just acquaintances. Seems they reconnected in Rainhaven." He cleared his throat. "Rowan's grown fond of the little girl. They spend time together often, and, well, Celia's usually with them." "Enough." Vivian cut him off with a raised hand. Her chest was tight again, but this time, it wasn't guilt. It was something far more bitter. Something hot and unfamiliar rising in her throat. How dare he? How dare Rowan look at another woman with that kind of softness? That tenderness was supposed to be hers. Only hers. The study door burst open. Maya and Aiden came running in barefoot, faces streaked with tears. "Mom!" Maya clung to Vivian's legs. Mrs. Pennington said you found Daddy, is it true? Vivian bent down and scooped her daughter into her arms. Her eyes drifted toward the photo still lying on the desk, Rowan smiling gently, a little girl in his arms. 3 months. He hadn't called. Not once. Not even to ask about the children. And yet, here he was, laughing with someone else's child in a town that wasn't theirs. Can we go see Daddy? Aidan tugged at her skirt, his voice small. We miss him. Vivian stared at the picture, at that picture-perfect scene of Rowan, Celia, and the girl. Her lips curled into a slow, cold smile. Ready the jet, she said to her assistant, brushing a tear from Maya's cheek. We're going to bring Daddy home. There was no way Rowan actually cared about that woman. This had to be about her. A performance. A punishment. Because once upon a time, he had loved her so much he endured 6 years of silence. And if she showed up, in person, with their children by her side, he would break. He had to. Meanwhile, in a cozy pottery studio in Rainhaven, Rowan sat at the wheel, focused on shaping a lump of clay. Amber leaned on the workbench beside him, her tiny face smudged with streaks of mud. Look! I made a bunny, she chirped, holding up a lumpy, crooked little figure. Rowan leaned in to inspect it, a grin playing on his lips. Then, with a sudden flick, he dabbed a bit of clay onto her nose. Oh, look at that, your bunny's got a round little nose now. Amber squealed with laughter and scooped up her own handful of clay, launching a counterattack. Soon the two of them were in a playful, muddy scuffle. From across the room, Celia approached with a tray of juice. Her blouse was dotted with splatters from the earlier mess, and yet her smile was nothing but fond. You too, she said with mock exasperation. Is this a pottery class or a battlefield? Sunlight poured in through the skylight, casting everything in a golden hue. She set down the tray and reached into her pocket for a handkerchief. Without hesitation, she leaned in to gently wipe a streak of clay from Rowan's cheek. Her fingers lingered a beat too long. When she realized how close their faces were, she froze. Her ears flushed pink. Amber, still giggling, paused to look between them. She dropped her clay and tilted her head. I wish we could stay like this forever, she said softly. You and Celia and me. Rowan's heart gave a strange little lurch. He looked up, and met Celia's eyes. There was something quiet and trembling in her gaze. Hope, maybe. Or longing she hadn't yet dared to speak. But as warmth began to rise in him, it was immediately shadowed by a single thought. Vivian. And the children. His smile faded. He didn't say a word. Amber, Celia said softly, cutting through the silence as if sensing the moment had grown too heavy. She gently nudged a small, freshly shaped clay bowl across the table toward her niece, her voice warm and light. Look at this. Do you like it? Amber's attention shifted immediately. The question she had asked moments ago, about staying together forever, vanished like morning mist. Rowan bowed his head, his fingers tracing the uneven texture of the clay. There was a quiet warmth in his chest, but also a sting, sharp and undeniable. Later, in the bathroom, Rowan stood in front of the mirror. 3 months. The dark circles beneath his eyes had faded. His mouth no longer bore that perpetual tightness. Even the scars on his body had begun to blur beneath new skin. The sunlight and soft winds of Rainhaven had done their work. They had soothed wounds no one else could see. But when Amber had whispered, "Always be together," it wasn't her face that flashed before his eyes. It was Aidan's. And Maya's. The children he'd once poured his entire heart into. The same ones who had pushed him down a flight of stairs. Was it truly possible to forget all of that? Was it possible to forgive? That same day, Vivian's private jet touched down on the sun-scorched tarmac of Rainhaven's airport. She stepped into the blinding heat, shielding her eyes as her children were carefully lifted from the plane by the guards. "Mom," Maya asked, tilting her face toward her, "will we really see Daddy today?" Vivian smoothed the wrinkles from her dress, her voice low and steady. "Of course. Daddy will be very happy to see you." Just then, her assistant approached at a brisk pace, handing her a file. "Ms. Winter, we've located him. He's at a pottery studio on the east side of town. Still with them." Inside the file was a photo, clearly taken from a distance. Rowan was crouched beside a little girl, gently wiping a smudge of clay from her cheek. Next to him stood a tall, slender woman, watching them with a soft smile. Sunlight streamed through the studio windows, casting all three of them in a golden glow. A portrait of peace. Vivian's fingers curled tight around the edges of the photo, crumpling it. She knew that look in the woman's eyes. It was the same look she had never given Rowan. The look of someone seeing a man, not as convenient or competent, but as cherished. "Get the car," Vivian said coldly. "We're going now." The ride to the pottery studio was unusually quiet. Aiden and Maya sat huddled by the window, watching the unfamiliar city blur past. Their small hands clutched the hems of their clothes in silence, nervous tension written all over their faces. Vivian noticed they were wearing the outfits Rowan had bought them last year. Too small now. The sleeves barely reached their wrists. "Mom," Aiden finally whispered, eyes wide and filled with worry. "Do you think Daddy will forgive us?" Vivian didn't answer right away. Her mind flashed back to the security footage. Rowan's face twisted in pain as he tumbled down the stairs. The way he left, not once looking back. "He will," she said at last, unsure if she was lying to them, or to herself. "Daddy loves you both more than anything. He'd never abandon you." The car pulled up to a modest studio with large glass windows. Through them, Vivian spotted Rowan instantly. He wore a plain white t-shirt and jeans, sleeves rolled up as he worked quietly with a ball of clay. The sunlight caught his profile, outlining him in a soft gold glow that made him seem peaceful. Almost happy. Just then, the little girl, Amber, scooped up a handful of clay and smushed it across Rowan's cheek with a mischievous giggle. To Vivian's surprise, he didn't scold her. Instead, he laughed. A full, unguarded laugh. His smile was so genuine, so free, it took her breath away. It was a face she hadn't seen in years. "Daddy!" Maya's voice pierced the moment like a spark. Before anyone could stop her, she tore herself free from the guard's hand and bolted toward the studio. "Maya!" Vivian called out, too late. She hurried after her daughter, heel striking pavement. The moment the door opened, the wind chime above it gave a soft, crystalline jingle. Rowan looked up at the sound. His smile froze. "Maya?" he said, voice tight and trembling. Then he saw Vivian behind her, and his expression shifted. Not to joy. Not even surprise. But to something far colder. A wall. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low. "How did you find me?" Amber peeked out from behind Rowan, curiosity flickering across her face. She instinctively stepped closer to him, clutching the edge of his shirt. Celia rose from her seat beside them, placing herself quietly between Rowan and the uninvited guests. "Daddy!" Aiden burst through the doorway, running straight to Rowan and wrapping his arms tightly around his leg. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "We missed you so much. Is this why you haven't come back?" His voice cracked. "You've been with them this whole time? You chose them over us?" His eyes shot a bitter glare at Amber, brimming with jealousy and pain. The little girl shrank back, clutching Rowan's shirt tightly in fear. Rowan stood frozen, hands hovering awkwardly midair. He didn't know whether to return the hug, or push them away. Then he caught the look in Aiden's eyes. Something hardened inside him. He slowly stepped back, pulling away from their grasp. His gaze flicked between the children, and Celia, and finally, landed on Vivian. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. But the words were sharp. Like glass. Vivian stepped forward. Her eyes swept past Celia and fixed firmly on Rowan. "We're here to bring you home." She kept her voice calm, composed, almost reasonable. "This has gone on long enough. You've punished us. The children understand now. It's time to come back." The entire pottery studio fell still. Other customers and staff had stopped working, all watching the scene unfold in stunned silence. "Home?" Rowan repeated, a cold laugh catching in his throat. "What home? Please, Daddy." Maya grabbed his hand and shook it desperately. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by nothing but trembling hope. "We won't make you angry again." "Yeah, Dad," Aiden added quickly. "We made Lucian leave. Mommy said it'll be just you. Only you. No one else." Rowan's expression faltered for a moment. He crouched down to their eye level, his voice quiet, but firm. "I'm not going back with you." "Why not?" Maya cried, her voice breaking as fat tears rolled down her cheeks. "Don't you love us anymore?" The question hit him like a slow, blunt blade. Sinking deep, twisting, impossible to ignore. He opened his mouth, then gave a bitter laugh. "Wasn't it you who pushed me down the stairs? Wasn't it you who told people I fed you mangoes on purpose?" His voice cracked slightly, but his gaze remained steady. "Wasn't it you too who said you didn't want me as your dad anymore, that you wanted Lucian instead?" He took a breath, his voice quieting but cutting even deeper. "I know I'm not the perfect father. But I did everything I could. I tried my best. I loved you with everything I had." He shook his head slightly, a weight pressing down on his chest. I don't understand how it all ended up like this." Aiden and Maya turned bright red. Shame filled their faces. But Aiden still refused to give up. "I was wrong," he whispered, then louder, "we were wrong. Please, Daddy, please forgive us." Before Rowan could answer, a small voice cut in. "Uncle Rowan?" Amber looked up at him, her little hands clutching the hem of his shirt. Tears welled in her big brown eyes. "Are you leaving?" Celia bent down and gently scooped Amber into her arms. "No, sweetheart," she said softly, brushing the girl's hair back. "Don't be afraid. Rowan won't abandon you. Wherever he decides to go, we'll respect that, okay? And even if he's not always here, he'll still visit and play with you." He promised. Vivian stared at the scene in front of her, at Celia holding the child, at Rowan standing protectively by their side. Something ignited in her chest. Jealousy. Fury. Who was this woman to stand next to her husband, acting like they were the real family? She stepped forward, voice low and sharp. "Rowan," she said, "stop being childish. The kids need you. You're really going to turn your back on your own children, and raise someone else's?" Rowan stood slowly, eyes glinting with a coldness Vivian had never seen before. "Childish," he repeated. "They need me?" His voice rose, a tremor barely hidden beneath the surface. "Did they need me when they pushed me down the stairs? Did they need me when they told a room full of people they hated me? Did they need me when they called Lucian Dad?" Each question hit like a slap. Vivian had no answer. She stood frozen. The children were now sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to Rowan's shirt. "We'll only love you now," Maya cried, gasping between breaths. "We'll never hurt you again. We promise." Rowan's eyes turned red, his lips trembling. But he didn't move. He didn't say yes. He didn't reach out. The wound was too deep. Celia silently handed Rowan a tissue. It was such a small gesture, but it sent Vivian over the edge. "Who do you think you are?" she snapped, her voice like ice. "What gives you the right to butt into our family business?" Celia calmly adjusted her glasses and replied evenly, "I'm Rowan's friend." She glanced at the two children, tear-streaked and trembling. "And as for rights, I'd say the people who hurt him the most probably don't get to ask that question." Vivian's fists clenched so tightly her knuckles cracked. Before she could explode, Amber's tiny voice piped up. "Uncle Rowan, we haven't finished our bowls yet." That single line cut through the tension like a thread of light. Rowan took a deep breath, steadying himself. He finally turned to Vivian, voice firm and unshakable. "Take the kids and go. I've said everything I needed to say. There's nothing more." "Daddy," the children cried out in unison, throwing their arms around his legs. "Please don't leave us. Please." The room descended into chaos. A few customers reached for their phones. The shop owner hesitated, eyeing the front door as if contemplating calling the police. In the middle of it all, Rowan stood pale and trembling. Vivian looked at his shaking hands, and in that moment, she realized something horrifying. She'd made a terrible mistake. She thought bringing the children would melt his heart. She hadn't once stopped to think about how much he'd been hurt. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. Some fractures never disappear, no matter how carefully you glue the pieces back together. She finally murmured, "Let's go." "No!" Aiden screamed, breaking down. He gripped Rowan's shirt with all his strength. You promised, you said Daddy would come home with us today." Rowan's eyes fluttered shut. A single tear traced silently down his cheek. Celia reached for Amber's hand. The little girl stepped forward and gently wrapped her fingers around Rowan's. It grounded him, anchored him, and gave him the strength to speak. "Vivian," he said, voice cold as frost and clearer than it had ever been. "Take them and leave. I told you before. What happened back then, I can't forgive it. If you're here to talk about child support, I'll transfer the money, no hesitation. But anything beyond that?" His eyes locked on hers. "Don't bring it up again. And if you show up here another time." He paused. "I won't hesitate to call the police." The words landed like a hammer. Vivian stumbled back a step, as though the ground had cracked beneath her heels. Her confidence shattered completely. Vivian had thought Rowan would cave, that he'd soften at the sight of the children and come home. But she was wrong. His resolve was unshakable. Gritting her teeth, she bent down and scooped both children into her arms, ignoring their wails and thrashing limbs. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed toward the door. Just before stepping out, she paused and looked back. Rowan was crouched beside Amber, gently whispering something to calm her down. Celia stood quietly nearby, her presence warm and steady. The three of them looked complete. A picture of closeness. Of peace. A family. Inside the studio, the storm had passed. Rowan sat silently at the wheel, hands caked in clay, fingers clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Amber sat beside him, unusually quiet, sneaking glances at him every few seconds. She couldn't bear it any longer. "Are you sad?" she asked gently, her bright eyes full of worry. "You look like you're hurting." His hands paused mid-motion. He forced a weak smile. "No, sweetheart. I'm okay. Don't worry about me." He nodded toward the clay. "Let's keep working on your little bowl, all right?" Celia quietly set a cup of warm water beside him. "You should take a break," she offered softly. Rowan shook his head. His gaze dropped to the misshapen bowl in his hands, lopsided, uneven. It looked just like the mess inside his chest. "Aiden and Maya," he murmured, barely audible. They looked thinner. Celia didn't respond. She just sat nearby, her presence calm, steady, like an anchor in a churning sea. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, landing gently on the worktable. Amber's bowl glowed faintly under the light. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, Amber looked up. "Let's make a gift for Uncle Rowan," she declared. Celia smiled and brushed a hand through her niece's hair. "What kind of gift, sweet pea?" "A little house." Amber grinned. "So he has a new home." Rowan's breath caught. Something sharp twisted behind his ribs. He looked at the girl, so focused and serious as she worked the clay with her tiny fingers. Then at Celia, guiding her patiently with that steady calm that had become so familiar. He hadn't realized it, not fully, not until now. Somehow, these two had woven themselves into his life. Into his heart. "Amber," he asked softly, voice rough at the edges, "why a house?" She glanced up, eyes bright and sure. "Because you're sad. And Celia told me, a home is where people feel happy. I want you to be happy again." Rowan's throat closed up. His eyes burned. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like something was ending. He felt like something new had just begun. Celia lowered her head, a touch embarrassed. Her ears flushed pink. "Kids say the wildest things," she murmured. "Don't take it to heart, Rowan." But Rowan looked at her, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. Then he let out a soft laugh, wiping at the corners of his eyes. "Meeting you both, it's been the best thing that's happened to me." Amber threw herself into his arms, wrapping her small arms tightly around his neck. "Then let's stay together forever, okay? Just like a real family." Celia froze mid-motion. A chunk of clay slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Her gaze lifted, and for a moment, her eyes met Rowan's. They both flushed at the same time. "Amber," Celia said gently, trying to sound stern, "you'll give Rowan too much pressure if you say things like that." "It's okay," Rowan replied, his smile calm and sincere as he gently patted the girl's head. His eyes lingered on Celia, warm and steady. "It's an honor to be a part of your lives." The two sets of eyes staring back at him, one wide and innocent, the other kind and steady, lit up like twin constellations. Rowan couldn't help but smile, something easing in his chest. The ache that had weighed so heavily on him these past months was finally giving way to something new. Something that felt a lot like peace. Rain had become a frequent visitor to Rainhaven. The streets were slick with drizzle, and even Sublime Books, the cozy corner bookstore, saw fewer customers lately. But one thing remained constant. A Bentley sat idling at the curb, day after day. Its owner never left the driver's seat, watching, waiting. Inside, Amber skipped across the floor, holding up a crayon drawing. "Look what I made," she beamed, waving it in the air. But she stopped short when she saw Rowan's expression. Her voice softened. "You're sad again, aren't you?" Rowan forced a smile and took the drawing gently from her hands. "It's beautiful," he said. "Is this a little bunny?" Amber nodded enthusiastically, then twisted her wrist to point toward the window. "Is it because those bad people came back again? Is that why you're sad?" Before Rowan could respond, Celia emerged from behind the bookshelf, carrying a mug of coffee, steam curling above the rim. Without a word, she stepped in front of the window, subtly blocking the view of the car across the street. "Should we call the police?" Celia asked softly, her eyes flicking toward the luxury car parked across the street. Through the misted rain, two small silhouettes could be seen pressed against the foggy window, their faces turned longingly toward the bookshop. Rowan shook his head. "They'll give up eventually," he said, voice flat. The rain intensified, pattering harder against the window panes. Then, suddenly, the car door flew open. Maya stumbled out, barely able to hold up a large black umbrella that dwarfed her small frame. She ran across the street, her dress and little leather shoes quickly soaked, but she didn't seem to care. Reaching the bookstore, she began pounding on the locked glass door, tears already mixing with rain on her cheeks. "Daddy! Please open the door," she cried, her voice trembling and raw. "I know you're in there. You saw us, why are you ignoring me and Aiden? Don't you want us anymore?" Behind the curtain, Rowan's hand clenched tight around the fabric, his knuckles turning stark white. Celia stepped quietly beside him, placing her warm hand over his trembling fist. Vivian's gaze flickered, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Rowan, the kids haven't been doing well these days. Their health was never great to begin with, and without you, without your care, things have only gotten worse." "I know," he cut in calmly, pulling out a brown envelope from his bag. "These are the growth journals I kept for them, from birth until now. Everything's in here, how to take care of them, what to look out for, their allergy list, medication history. They're old enough now. I'm sure you can manage." Vivian's face turned ghostly pale. Her lips trembled. "I don't want this," she choked. "Rowan, can't you see? We don't want papers, we want you. We just want you back." He didn't look at her. Instead, he let out a quiet, bitter laugh and slowly rolled up his left sleeve. A jagged scar, deep and discolored, ran down his forearm. "Remember this?" he asked, his tone oddly serene. "This was from the broken glass when Aiden pushed me down the stairs. That night, I spent hours in the ER getting 12 stitches, and while I was there, the three of you were at home having a cozy dinner with Lucian." Aiden's face drained of all color. His lips trembled. "Dad. I didn't mean to. I didn't do it on purpose." Rowan gently shook his head, then lifted the hem of his pants to reveal another scar, much worse. A thick, brutal line stretched across his leg, grotesque and twisted, as though a chunk of flesh had been carved away. "This one," he said softly, "was from when Lucian and I were trapped in the elevator. You said he had a piano recital, so without hesitation, you chose to leave me behind." His voice was low, but each word cut like a blade. "My leg, just barely, it was almost gone." He looked up at Vivian, his eyes ice-cold. "All of you keep saying it wasn't on purpose. That it was just a mistake. That you didn't mean to hurt me. But what about me?" He leaned forward slightly. "The one who was hurt, bleeding, abandoned, humiliated. Do I not matter? Am I supposed to pretend it's all fine because you said it wasn't intentional?" Vivian couldn't find a word to say. The cafe was silent except for the sound of Maya's sudden sobbing. She threw herself at him, trying to wrap her arms around his arm. "But we know we were wrong now. Daddy, please, please come back. We won't ever hurt you again." Rowan looked down at his daughter's tear-streaked face. Oddly, he didn't feel pain anymore. Just a quiet stillness. There was no more twisting in his gut, no more ache behind his ribs. He simply sat there, and waited for the sobbing to die down. "I used to," Rowan's voice was low and heavy, each word seeming to scrape its way out of his chest. "I used to love you all so much. Maya was born premature. I stayed beside her incubator for 7 days and nights without leaving. When Aiden got bullied and refused to go to school, I walked him to the classroom every morning until he felt safe again. Every single birthday, I remembered them all. I baked your cakes by hand. I gave everything I had." He paused. Then looked straight at them. "But love can run out. When you pushed me down the stairs, when you said you never wanted to see me again, when you chose Lucian to be your father, whatever we had, ended right then." He stood up. Placed money under his coffee cup. "I didn't come today to punish you," he said, voice calm but resolute. "I came to tell you this, I'm not coming back. Not because I want revenge, but because I've started a new life. I don't want to crawl back into the mud of the past. I'm done being tangled in things that no longer matter. He turned around and walked away without hesitation. Behind him, Maya's wailing ripped through the cafe like a knife. Daddy! Please don't leave us. Please don't leave us. But Rowan didn't stop. He pushed open the cafe door. Across the street, Celia stood by the car, Amber's tiny hand in hers. The moment Amber saw him, she broke free and ran across the sidewalk. Rowan, she cried, throwing herself into his arms. Her little hands cupped his cheeks, searching his face with wide, worried eyes. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Rowan bent down and lifted her up, planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. I'm fine, he said softly. Let's go home. Celia walked over, asking no questions. She simply slipped her hand around his arm. The three of them walked toward the car, their silhouettes bathed in sunlight, peaceful, complete. Inside the cafe, Maya's sobs slowly faded. Vivian sat frozen, her eyes locked on the scene outside. She watched Rowan step into the sleek car. Watched the little girl lean lovingly against him. Watched the other woman fasten his seatbelt, tender and familiar, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Aiden tugged at her sleeve, his voice trembling with a fear she'd never heard before. Mom, is Dad really never coming back? Vivian couldn't answer. All the certainty she'd held on to was gone. This time, it felt like they had truly, irreversibly lost Rowan. Rowan stood on the balcony, quietly watching Amber as she watered the flower bed in the yard below. The little girl wore a pale yellow dress, humming off-key while hopping from one stone path to another, light as a butterfly. Her joy was so pure, it made the entire garden seem brighter. What are you thinking about? A pair of warm arms wrapped around him from behind. Celia rested her chin gently against his back, her embrace light but grounding. She still carried the faint scent of disinfectant from the hospital, clearly just home from work. I was just remembering, Rowan hadn't even turned around yet, but a soft smile had already formed on his lips. The first time we met, when you came into the bookstore with Amber to buy picture books. Celia chuckled softly, her eyes shimmering with warmth. Even back then, I thought, how has this man managed to stay so handsome all these years? You really know how to flatter a guy, Rowan laughed, the sound low and carefree. Their laughter carried into the garden and caught Amber's attention. She dropped her watering can and darted toward the house, bouncing up the stairs like a spring breeze. Rowan! What are you two whispering about? Celia bent down and scooped her up, pressing a kiss to her dirt-smudged cheek. I was asking Rowan if he'd like to be with us, forever. Amber's eyes lit up instantly, her little hands clinging tightly to Rowan's shirt. Really? Rowan, do you want to stay with us forever? Rowan felt his heart melt like sugar in warm tea. He took her gently into his arms, smiled at her with a look that was both tender and sure, and said, if Amber wants me to. I do. I do. Amber shouted, wrapping her arms around his neck, before turning to Celia with the urgency only children possess. Hurry. Give Rowan the ring, just like they do on TV. Celia's cheeks flushed pink, but she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small red velvet box, pressing it into his hand. Rowan, her voice trembled slightly, would you? I will. He didn't wait for her to finish. His answer was calm and steady, though tears welled up in his eyes. The smile that followed was pure joy. They set the wedding date for 3 months later. On the day of the ceremony, the weather was unexpectedly perfect. Celia wore a simple white gown, holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Amber had gathered herself. As she walked toward Rowan through a path lined with their loved ones, sunlight spilled through the trees like a blessing. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Amber was the first to rush forward, throwing herself into Rowan's arms without hesitation. Behind the gathered wedding guests, 3 lonely figures stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. "I'll handle it," Celia whispered, squeezing Rowan's hand gently. "No. I'll go," Rowan said, inhaling deeply before walking toward the entrance. The moment the doors opened, Maya rushed forward, her voice bright with hope. "Daddy! You look so handsome today." Rowan took a step back, avoiding her hug. His voice was cold. "Why are you here?" Vivian's gaze drifted past him to the ceremony behind, her voice hoarse and heavy with longing. "We mean no harm. We just wanted to offer our blessings." "That won't be necessary," Rowan replied calmly. "You should leave." He didn't raise his voice, but it landed with a quiet finality. Vivian turned pale. Her hand trembled as she pulled the 2 tearful children close. There was a flicker of desperation in her eyes. "Let's go," she said, her voice cracking. "No." Maya broke free and clung to Rowan's leg, sobbing uncontrollably. "Daddy, please look at me. Just look at me." Rowan lowered his eyes to the daughter he had once cherished more than anything. But he didn't bend down. Instead, he gently pried her fingers from his leg. "Goodbye, Maya. And Aiden. Don't come looking for me again. Live your new lives. I'm living mine now." As he turned to leave, he heard Vivian's muffled sobs and the children's cries tearing through the air behind him. But as he stepped back into the sunlit ceremony and saw Amber running toward him, tossing flower petals from her basket, and Celia smiling at him from beneath the arbor, those sounds grew distant and faint, like echoes from another life. Later, Rowan heard from Mr. Davenport that the children weren't doing well. After Lucian was forced out, the household fell apart. Vivian became consumed with work. The kids were sent to boarding school. Their tempers grew worse. They tried returning to Rainhaven once, but the community security stopped them at the gate. Sometimes, Rowan still dreamed of the past. Of the nights he sat by Aiden's bedside when the boy was burning with fever. Of the first time the children called him Dad with bright, innocent eyes. But every time he woke in a cold sweat, Celia was there, holding him close and whispering gently until the tremors passed. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night, her voice quiet with hesitation. Rowan looked out toward the garden, where Amber was chasing 2 stray kittens through the grass. He shook his head slowly. "My life is full now. The road ahead is bright. I don't look back anymore." Just then, Amber came running up, breathless, cheeks flushed and covered in bits of grass. "They're so cute. Can we keep them?" "Of course we can," Rowan said with a smile, gently brushing her damp hair from her face. "This is our home. You get to decide." Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns across the 3 of them. And the shadows that had once clung so tightly to his life no longer touched him at all.